Long before Babylon rose into legend, before its gates carried the color of deep blue stone and its towers climbed toward the heavens, there was only the quiet land between two rivers. In the ancient darkness of the world, the Tigris and the Euphrates moved slowly through wide plains of mud and reeds, reflecting silver moonlight beneath endless skies. Warm winds crossed the open earth at night, carrying the scent of river water, wet clay, and distant fires burning beside small settlements that rested quietly against the shore. The land seemed both gentle and dangerous at once. In spring, the rivers overflowed their banks and spread dark, fertile soil across the plain. The water brought life to the empty earth, leaving behind rich ground where grain could grow beneath the burning sun. Yet the same rivers could also destroy without warning. Floodwaters sometimes arrived with terrifying force, swallowing fields, homes, and narrow pathways beneath thick currents of mud. The people who settled there learned quickly that survival depended upon patience, cooperation, and careful observation of the restless waters surrounding them. At night, the earliest villagers listened to insects singing beside the reeds while small cooking fires flickered beneath the stars. Reed boats drifted quietly along the riverbanks, guided by fishermen whose silhouettes moved softly through the darkness. Beyond the villages stretched enormous plains untouched by walls or kingdoms, where silence seemed to continue forever beneath the pale glow of the moon. The world still felt young then, vast and uncertain, waiting for human hands to shape it into something lasting. No mountains protected this land. No forests covered the horizon. Everything depended upon the rivers and the delicate balance they created. Slowly, generation after generation, people learned how to guide water into narrow canals carved through the soil. They shaped mud into bricks and raised simple homes against the shifting wind. Fields widened beside the riverbanks, and villages slowly grew larger as travelers arrived seeking fertile ground and calmer futures. Perhaps this was why civilization first awakened there, in the quiet space between rivers beneath the ancient stars. Life demanded cooperation. The rivers demanded planning. Survival required memory, patience, and trust between neighbors. Over many centuries, small settlements became crowded communities filled with workers, farmers, traders, and priests who watched the heavens for signs carried through the night sky. And somewhere within that ancient world of water, mud, moonlight, and ambition, one city would slowly rise above all others. Its name, still whispered thousands of years later, was Babylon. Along the riverbanks, children carried baskets of reeds while elders repaired fishing nets beneath fading sunlight. Potters pressed wet clay beneath careful fingers, shaping jars that would hold grain, oil, and cool river water through the long summer heat. Even in those earliest centuries, people began to imagine permanence against a world that often felt uncertain. Beneath quiet constellations drifting overhead, they built not only homes, but the first fragile foundations of organized human history beside the softly moving Euphrates River. As centuries passed beside the slow rivers of Mesopotamia, the scattered villages of mud and reed gradually began to change. What had once been quiet clusters of homes surrounded by fields slowly grew into crowded settlements filled with narrow pathways, busy marketplaces, and rising temple walls. Beneath the heat of the daytime sun and the cool stillness of desert nights, humanity was learning how to live together on a scale the world had never seen before. Farmers guided water carefully through hand-dug canals that stretched outward like veins across the fertile plain. Barley swayed gently beside the riverbanks while date palms rustled softly in the evening wind. Shepherds moved their animals across dusty paths worn smooth by countless footsteps, and fishermen returned at dusk with dripping nets shining beneath fading orange light. Every season brought its own rhythms, and the people of the rivers slowly organized their lives around them. The cities themselves rose from the earth in humble ways. Mud bricks dried beneath the sun became walls, homes, stairways, and storehouses. The same rivers that nourished the fields also provided the clay beneath people's feet. Entire worlds were shaped from water and soil. At night, oil lamps glowed softly inside crowded homes while distant voices drifted through the warm darkness beyond the rooftops. As populations grew, so did ambition. Some people became builders, others merchants, priests, metalworkers, or scribes who pressed symbols carefully into wet clay tablets. Those markings, simple at first, slowly became one of humanity's earliest forms of writing. Records of grain, trade, and daily life were preserved beneath the temple lamps, allowing memory itself to survive beyond a single lifetime. lifetime. The great temple structures at the center of these cities rose higher with every generation. Their stairways carried priests closer toward the heavens, where stars moved silently above the sleeping world. The people believed the skies held messages from divine powers, and so astronomy, religion, and government slowly became woven together beneath the same endless constellation. Travelers arrived from distant lands carrying stone, timber, copper, and stories from places beyond the horizon. Markets filled with unfamiliar languages and strange goods brought along the river routes. The settlements of Mesopotamia no longer felt isolated. They had become living centers of exchange, curiosity, and growing power. And among those rising cities beside the restless rivers, one settlement would eventually begin drawing greater attention than all the others. Its walls were still modest then, its streets still young, but the foundations of Babylon had already begun settling quietly into the ancient earth beside the Euphrates. During the quiet hours before dawn, when cool air drifted across the canals and the last stars still shimmered above the plains, few could have imagined how far these early cities would one day reach, yet within their crowded streets and glowing temples lived the beginnings of empire, mathematics, astronomy. Law and memory itself. Civilization was no longer wandering through the wilderness. It had found a home beside the rivers, and history had begun. Far to the south of the older Sumerian cities, beside a calm curve of the Euphrates River, a modest settlement slowly gathered strength beneath the burning Mesopotamian sun. At first, Babylon was little different from the many towns scattered across the fertile plain. Its walls were low, its temples humble, and its people lived ordinary lives shaped by harvests, trade, prayer, and the unpredictable moods of the rivers. Yet something about its position allowed the settlement to grow steadily while other cities struggled against drought, invasion, or decline. Caravans traveling across Mesopotamia found Babylon perfectly placed along important trade routes connecting distant kingdoms. Boats drifted north and south along the Euphrates carrying grain, timber, copper, oils, and woven cloth. Merchants rested inside the city gates while priests burned incense beneath quiet temple ceiling. The sounds of many languages began echoing through the streets long before Babylon became famous across the ancient world. At sunset, warm light spread across the mud brick walls, turning the growing city gold beside the riverbanks. Palm trees swayed gently in the evening wind while smoke from cooking fires rose into darkening skies. Inside crowded courtyards, families gathered beneath hanging lanterns to escape the fading heat of the day. Musicians played soft melodies beside open windows, and somewhere beyond the rooftops, temple chants drifted slowly upward toward the stars. Generation after generation, Babylon expanded patiently. New canals carried water toward distant farms, strengthening the city's food supply and increasing its wealth. Craftsmen shaped bronze tools, jewelers polished bright stones, and scribes filled clay tablets with records preserving the growing complexity of urban life. The city became organized, disciplined, and increasingly ambitious, but Babylon's rise was not shaped by wealth alone. The rulers of the city understood something deeply important about power. Armies could conquer land, yet ideas, laws, religion, and trade could hold an empire together far longer than fear alone. Slowly, Babylon transformed into more than a settlement beside a river. It became a center of influence, culture, and authority whose reputation spread across neighboring kingdoms. Travelers arriving at Babylon after weeks crossing empty deserts must have felt a quiet sense of wonder as the city appeared beside the shimmering Euphrates. Torchlight flickered along distant walls while enormous constellations stretched overhead in the warm night sky. Even before Babylon reached the height of its glory, people already sensed that the city carried unusual importance, as though history itself had begun gathering around its gates. And in the centuries ahead, Babylon would rise higher still, becoming a place where kings dreamed of eternity, where gardens were said to hang above the earth, and where human ambition reached toward the heavens beside the ancient rivers. Yet beneath all its growing beauty remained the same restless rivers that had shaped the world from the beginning. Their waters continued flowing through darkness and sunlight alike, carrying whispers of uncertainty. Beside every triumph, Babylon stood balanced between creation and destruction, between memory and ambition, while ancient stars watched the sleeping plain. Morning arrived slowly beside the Euphrates River. Before the sun climbed fully above the flat horizon of Mesopotamia, thin layers of silver mist drifted across the water while fishermen pushed narrow reed boats quietly into the current. The city of Babylon still rested beneath soft blue shadows, and only the earliest sounds of waking life echoed through its streets. Somewhere in the distance, a bronze bell rang softly from a temple courtyard. Dogs barked near the outer walls. Smoke from small cooking fires began curling upward into the cool dawn air. Babylon was not yet the magnificent imperial capital it would later become. Its walls were sturdy but modest, its temples growing steadily rather than towering over the world. Yet even in those early centuries, the city possessed a quiet confidence shaped by its position beside the river that carried life through the heart of Mesopotamia. The Euphrates was more than water to the people of Babylon. It was movement, survival, trade, and memory itself. Boats loaded with grain, clay jars, woven cloth, and timber floated constantly along its broad current. Merchants arriving from distant settlements stepped onto Babylon's crowded docks carrying spices, copper tools, carved stones, and stories gathered from lands far beyond the horizon. Along the riverbanks, workers shouted softly while unloading cargo beneath the growing heat of morning. As the sun rose higher, the city awakened completely. Bakers carried warm flatbread through narrow streets already filling with people. Farmers guided donkeys loaded with barley toward the marketplaces. Potters arranged fresh clay vessels outside their workshops while scribes settled beneath shaded awnings beside stacks of wet tablets waiting to be marked with careful symbols. Above the busy streets stood the temples of Babylon, their stairways catching golden sunlight while priests moved quietly through columns scented with oil smoke and incense. Religion touched nearly every part of life within the city. The people believed the gods shaped floods, harvests, storms, and even the movements of stars overhead. Each evening, temple fires flickered against the darkening sky while chants drifted gently across the rooftops beside the sound of flowing water. Yet Babylon's greatest strength was not only spiritual devotion or fertile farmland. It was location. The city stood at the meeting point of major trade routes crossing Mesopotamia. Armies could move through it. Merchants depended upon it. Travelers rested within its walls after long journeys across open deserts. Wealth flowed steadily into Babylon like the river beside it. Its rulers understood this advantage well. They strengthened canals, organized trade, repaired walls, and expanded the city carefully year after year. Babylon became disciplined, prosperous, and increasingly influential among neighboring kingdoms whose own power often rose and vanished with frightening speed. At sunset, the city transformed once again. Warm orange light spread across mud-brick homes while long shadows stretched through the crowded streets. Musicians played stringed instruments inside open courtyards, and children chased one another beside glowing market lanterns. Above everything, the Euphrates reflected the fading sky like dark polished glass flowing endlessly through the ancient world. And as night settled gently over Babylon, few people sleeping beneath its rooftops could fully imagine what their city would one day become. Yet the foundations of greatness were already there beside the river, carried quietly within its wealth, its ambition, and the steady current of the Euphrates moving beneath the stars. The rulers of early Babylon did not begin as masters of a vast empire. They inherited a world already crowded with ancient cities, rival kings, shifting alliances, and restless borders. Across Mesopotamia, kingdoms rose beside the rivers only to disappear again beneath invasion, famine, or internal conflict. Power rarely remained still for long, yet the kings of Babylon looked beyond survival alone. Beneath the heat of desert sunlight and the glow of temple fires at night, they imagined something larger. From the balconies of their palaces, Babylon's rulers watched caravans arrive endlessly through the city gate. Wealth moved constantly along the Euphrates, flowing through marketplaces crowded with merchants, laborers, priests, and travelers from distant lands. The kings understood that whoever controlled Babylon controlled more than walls and streets. They controlled movement itself across the heart of Mesopotamia, so the city expanded carefully under their command. Defensive walls grew thicker. Canals stretched farther across the plains, feeding larger harvests that strengthened both population and military power. Soldiers trained beneath the open sky while blacksmiths hammered bronze weapons late into the evening. Babylon was preparing itself quietly, steadily, for a greater role in the ancient world. At night, when cooler winds crossed the rooftops and oil lamps flickered against palace walls, advisors gathered beside their rulers to discuss trade, diplomacy, and war. Maps scratched into clay tablets showed neighboring cities whose loyalty could shift like river currents. Some kingdoms offered alliances. Others watched Babylon with suspicion, aware that its influence was growing year after year. Yet conquest in the ancient world required more than armies alone. A ruler needed patience, organization, and the ability to inspire obedience across distant territories. The kings of Babylon studied the successes and failures of earlier empires that had briefly dominated Mesopotamia before collapsing back into dust and silence. They understood how fragile greatness could become if fear alone held an empire together. And so Babylon's rulers strengthened religion alongside government. Temples became centers of both spiritual and political authority. Priests advised kings beneath towering columns scented with incense smoke, while ceremonies honoring the gods reminded the population that order itself carried divine importance. To obey Babylon was to obey stability, tradition, and sacred balance beneath the heaven. As generations passed, the ambitions of Babylon's rulers grew bolder. Smaller cities fell under Babylonian influence one by one, some through diplomacy, others through displays of military strength. Messengers traveled constantly between settlements carrying commands sealed beneath royal symbols pressed into clay. Babylon was no longer merely surviving beside the Euphrates. It was beginning to shape the fate of surrounding kingdoms. Travelers approaching the city could already sense its rising confidence. The walls stretched farther than before, markets overflowed with imported goods, temple towers climbed higher into the burning sky. Babylon had become a place where power gathered naturally, as though the rivers themselves were feeding its ambition. And among the rulers who guided this transformation, one king would eventually rise above all others. His name would endure for thousands of years, carved into stone beside laws that sought to bring order to an uncertain world. In the centuries ahead, Hammurabi would lead Babylon into a new age of authority, discipline, and imperial greatness beside the ancient rivers of Mesopotamia. By the time Hammurabi rose to power, Babylon was no longer a quiet city beside the Euphrates. Its influence stretched across growing territories, its markets overflowed with trade, and its rulers had begun shaping the future of Mesopotamia itself. Yet the world surrounding Babylon remained unstable. Rival kingdoms competed constantly for land and resources, while ordinary people lived beneath uncertain laws that often changed from one city to another. In such a world, justice could feel as unpredictable as the flooding rivers. Hammurabi understood that true power required more than conquest. Armies could capture cities, but laws could hold civilizations together long after battles ended. And so, beneath the burning skies of ancient Mesopotamia, he began creating something that would outlive palaces, armies, and even Babylon itself. During the quiet hours before dawn, scribes gathered inside palace chambers lit by oil lamps while clay tablets covered with careful writing surrounded them. Messengers carried reports from distant towns describing disputes between merchants, accusations of theft, arguments over farmland, marriage agreements, debts, and punishment. Hammurabi listened closely to the problems of his growing kingdom, determined to create order across lands divided by language, tradition, and class. Eventually, his laws were carved into towering stone monuments for the public to see. The great black stone steels stood beneath open skies where sunlight touched the carved symbols during the day and moonlight illuminated them at night. At the top of the monument, Hammurabi was shown standing before a divine figure, receiving authority from the gods themselves. Law was not presented merely as human invention. It was sacred order brought into the chaos of earthly life. The code itself covered nearly every corner of existence. It described wages, trade, marriage, farming, construction, inheritance, violence, and punishment. Builders whose houses collapsed could face severe consequences. Merchants who cheated customers were held accountable. Even disputes between neighbors carried legal solutions carefully recorded into stone. To modern eyes, some punishments seem harsh and unforgiving. Yet for the ancient world, Hammurabi's code represented something remarkable. It declared that society should operate according to visible rules rather than the unpredictable desires of powerful individuals alone. Justice became something written, permanent, and shared across the empire. Inside Babylon, life continued moving beneath the shadow of these laws. Farmers guided water through canals under the afternoon heat. Traders argued prices inside crowded marketplaces scented with dust and spices. Children played in narrow alleyways while temple priests watched the stars from high terraces after sunset. Everywhere within the city, law quietly shaped daily existence like the steady banks guiding the Euphrates River itself. At night, the great stone monuments stood silently beneath endless constellation. Warm desert winds carried grains of sand across their carved surfaces while nearby temple fires flickered against the darkness. Hammurabi likely understood that stone possessed a kind of immortality. Human voices faded, kingdoms weakened. But writing carved deeply into stone could survive for generations, and so his laws endured long after his lifetime ended. Even centuries later, people remembered Hammurabi not simply as a conqueror, but as a ruler who sought to organize civilization itself beneath divine authority and human reason. Yet Babylon was more than kings and monuments alone. Beyond the palace walls lived thousands of ordinary people whose daily routines filled the city with life, movement, laughter, labor, prayer, and quiet dreams beside the ancient river. As the power of Babylon grew beneath its kings, ordinary life continued flowing quietly through the city streets beside the Euphrates. Beyond the palace walls and temple towers lived thousands of people whose daily routines shaped the true heartbeat of the ancient world. Long before sunrise, while the sky still carried deep shades of blue and silver, silver, the city slowly began to awaken. Bread ovens glowed softly inside narrow homes built from sun-dried mud brick. The scent of warm barley bread drifted through twisting alleyways, while women carried jars of water from public wells before the heat of the day arrived. Donkeys moved steadily through the streets, pulling carts loaded with grain, pottery, and woven baskets. Somewhere nearby, a merchant raised the wooden shutters of his small shop while musicians played quiet melodies to greet the morning. Babylon's streets were crowded but alive with rhythm and familiarity. Craftsmen worked carefully beneath shaded awnings, shaping bronze tools, carving wooden furniture, or pressing decorative patterns into wet clay. Potters spun their wheels slowly while rows of fresh vessels dried beneath the blazing Mesopotamian sun. Jewelers polished bright stones imported from distant lands, and weavers sat patiently beside large wooden looms, creating colorful fabrics that fluttered gently in the evening wind. In the marketplaces, voices blended into a constant murmur that echoed between the mud brick walls. Traders from many regions arrived carrying spices, copper, incense, oils, wool, and rare woods gathered from territories far beyond Babylon's horizon. Different languages filled the air beside laughter, bargaining, and the soft clinking of metal scales weighing precious goods. Children ran barefoot through the busy streets, chasing one another between crowded stalls, while elders rested beneath palm shade, discussing harvests, politics, and the changing moods of the river. Scribes sat quietly at low tables, recording agreements onto clay tablets with careful concentration. Nearby, priests in long robes moved slowly toward temple courtyards where incense smoke drifted upward beneath the burning afternoon sky. Life inside Babylon was not luxurious for most people. Summers were intensely hot, labor was demanding, and floods or poor harvests could still bring hardship. Yet the city also offered opportunity, stability, and connection to something larger than isolated village life. Babylon felt alive in ways few places in the ancient world could match. As evening approached, the pace of the city softened. Long shadows stretched across the streets while merchants packed away goods beneath fading orange sunlight. Families gathered inside open courtyards to share meals of bread, dates, lentils, fish, and beer brewed from barley. Oil lamps flickered warmly against the walls as cool winds finally drifted through the city after the exhausting heat of day. Then came the nights of Babylon, calm and beautiful beneath endless stars. Temple fires glowed softly above the rooftops, while distant music floated through the darkness from hidden courtyards beside the river. The Euphrates reflected moonlight like moving silver, carrying quiet boats through sleeping sections of the city. And above it all rose Babylon's temples, where priests and astronomers watched the heavens carefully, searching the stars for messages they believed shaped the fate of both kings and ordinary people alike beside the ancient river. When darkness settled over Babylon and the heat of the day finally faded from the stone streets, the city entered its most mysterious hours. Oil lamps flickered softly beneath archways while cool desert winds drifted through the narrow alleys beside the Euphrates. Above the rooftops, the night sky stretched endlessly across Mesopotamia, filled with stars so bright and numerous that the heavens seemed almost alive. For the people of Babylon, the sky was never empty. Every movement of the moon, every wandering planet, every distant constellation carried meaning. The stars were believed to be messages written by divine powers watching over the world below. And so, while much of the city slept beneath warm blankets and quiet courtyards, priests climbed slowly toward the temple rooftops to study the heavens in silence. The great temples of Babylon rose above the city like mountains built from mud brick and devotion. Their stairways climbed level upon level toward sacred chambers where fires burned through the night. Incense drifted through dark halls scented with cedar oil and smoke, while chants echoed softly between towering columns. To step inside these temples was to leave behind the ordinary world of markets and labor and enter a place where earth and sky seemed connected. At the highest levels of the temples, astronomer priests observed the stars with extraordinary patience. Night after night, year after year, they recorded the movements of heavenly bodies onto clay tablets beneath flickering lamplight. They tracked eclipses, lunar cycles, planetary paths, and seasonal changes with remarkable precision for the ancient world. In Babylon, astronomy and spirituality existed together as one sacred practice. The moon held particular importance. Its pale glow illuminated the riverbanks, temple walls, and sleeping gardens of the city, while priests interpreted its changing shape as a sign of cosmic balance. During certain nights, ceremonies filled the temple courtyards with music, prayers, and offerings placed carefully before statues of the gods. Citizens gathered quietly beneath torchlight seeking protection, wisdom, favorable harvests, or guidance through uncertain times. Even ordinary people felt connected to the heavens above them. Families sleeping inside open courtyards watched constellations drift slowly slowly across the sky before closing their eyes. Travelers crossing the desert navigated by the stars. Farmers relied upon seasonal patterns linked to celestial movement. The sky became a clock, a calendar, and a source of spiritual comfort within an unpredictable world. And perhaps there was something naturally soothing about those ancient nights beside the Euphrates. The sound of moving water below the temple walls, the distant murmur of prayers carried through darkness, the warm wind brushing across stone terraces while countless stars shimmered silently overhead. Babylon must have felt suspended between earth and eternity itself. Yet within this peaceful beauty lived another quiet truth. Empires often looked strongest just before change began approaching from distant horizons. Beyond Babylon's glowing temples and prosperous streets, rival kingdoms continued rising across the ancient world. New powers gathered strength beyond the rivers, watching carefully while Babylon expanded beneath the stars. For now, however, the city still rested peacefully beneath the heavens, believing its greatness might last forever beside the eternal flow of the Euphrates River. Year after year, Babylon's influence spread farther across the lands surrounding the Euphrates. What had once been a strong river city slowly transformed into the center of a growing empire whose authority reached across Mesopotamia beneath the burning desert sun. Roads filled with merchants now also carried soldiers, royal messengers, and officials traveling between territories governed from Babylon's expanding heart. The city itself reflected this rising power. New walls surrounded older neighborhoods. Massive gates guarded the entrances where armed watchmen observed travelers entering from distant regions. Granaries overflowed with harvests gathered from fertile lands connected by carefully maintained canals. Wealth moved constantly through the empire like water through the rivers, feeding Babylon's ambition with every passing season. Beyond the city, neighboring kingdoms faced difficult choices. Some accepted Babylonian rule peacefully, hoping for stability and protection beneath its growing authority. Others resisted and watched Babylon's armies approach across dusty plains beneath banners moving slowly in the hot wind. Bronze weapons flashed beneath sunlight while disciplined soldiers marched beside supply caravans carrying grain, tools, and water across enormous distances. Yet conquest did not always arrive through violence alone. Babylon's rulers understood the power of trade, diplomacy, religion, and administration. Governors were appointed to oversee distant territories. Scribes recorded taxes, harvests, and legal disputes onto endless clay tablets. Temples honoring Babylonian gods appeared inside conquered cities, quietly extending cultural influence alongside political control. At night, inside palace chambers lit by oil lamps, advisors gathered around maps showing rivers, borders, and neighboring powers still beyond Babylon's reach. Conversations moved softly through the darkness while servants poured wine into carved cups beside flickering shadows. The empire continued growing, but so did the responsibilities carried by those who ruled it. For ordinary citizens, Babylon's expansion brought both prosperity and uncertainty. Markets became richer with imported goods arriving from farther regions than ever before. Exotic woods, precious stones, perfumes, and fine textiles filled merchant stalls beside unfamiliar languages spoken by travelers from distant lands. The city felt larger, more powerful, more connected to the wider world. But empires always carried hidden strain beneath their greatness. Larger borders required larger armies. Greater wealth attracted jealous rivals. Conquered territories sometimes obeyed only out of fear or necessity rather than loyalty. And beyond the visible strength of Babylon's walls, other civilizations quietly watched the empire's growing dominance with cautious attention. Still, during these years, Babylon appeared unstoppable. Its temples glowed beneath the stars. Its river markets overflowed with life. Its rulers believed the city's destiny had only just begun. Along the Euphrates, boats continued drifting beneath moonlit skies while warm winds carried the scent of river water through sleeping streets. Somewhere atop the temple terraces, priests studied the heavens searching for signs within the constellations above. Perhaps even they could not fully see what waited in the centuries ahead, the extraordinary beauty still to come, the towering monuments not yet built, and the golden age that would eventually transform Babylon into one of the greatest legends in human history. By the time Nebuchadnezzar II inherited the throne of Babylon, the city already stood among the great powers of the ancient world. Its walls stretched wide beside the Euphrates, its temples rose above crowded streets, and its markets overflowed with wealth gathered from distant kingdoms. Yet for Nebuchadnezzar, greatness alone was not enough. He dreamed of transforming Babylon into something so magnificent that future generations would speak speak its name with wonder long after his empire faded into dust. From the highest terraces of the royal palace, the king often looked across the vast city beneath the golden light of evening. Smoke drifted upward from thousands of homes, while the Euphrates reflected the setting sun like molten bronze flowing through the heart of Babylon. Beyond the walls stretched endless plains touched by warm desert wind, and above everything shimmered the immense Mesopotamian sky filled with silent stars. Nebuchadnezzar imagined a city unlike any the world had ever seen. Under his command, Babylon entered an age of enormous construction. Workers arrived from every corner of the empire carrying stone, cedar wood, bronze, and brilliant glazed bricks colored deep blue like the evening heaven. The sound of labor filled the city from dawn until nightfall. Hammers struck against stone. Oxen pulled massive carts through crowded streets. Scribes recorded shipments arriving endlessly through the gates, while architects studied detailed plans beneath shaded courtyards. The king believed architecture could achieve immortality where armies could not. Conquests eventually ended. Borders shifted, but monuments could survive for centuries, carrying the memory of their creators far beyond death itself. Every wall, temple, and gate built under Nebuchadnezzar's rule became part of a vision larger than ordinary politics. Babylon would not simply dominate the ancient world, it would astonish it. The city's sacred temples were expanded until they towered over surrounding neighborhoods like mountains of sunlit stone and mud brick. Processional roads widened beneath carefully laid pavement, where religious ceremonies and royal celebrations moved through the heart of the capital beneath banners fluttering in the desert wind. Massive defensive walls surrounded Babylon in layers, protecting the city while also displaying its enormous wealth and engineering skill. At night, torchlight illuminated the construction sites while workers continued beneath cooler air after the fierce daytime heat faded. The sounds of distant chanting drifted from temple courtyards where priests prayed for divine favor upon the king's project. Babylon itself seemed alive during these years, constantly growing, changing, and reaching upward toward greater beauty. Nebuchadnezzar's ambitions were deeply personal as well. Some ancient stories claim he built extraordinary gardens for a queen who longed for the green mountains of her homeland far from Mesopotamia's flat plain. Whether entirely true or partly legend, the story reflected something important about the king himself. He understood that power alone could not inspire lasting admiration. Beauty mattered too. Travelers approaching Babylon during Nebuchadnezzar's reign must have felt overwhelming awe rising within them as the city appeared across the horizon. Towering walls shimmered beneath sunlight. Temple peaks climbed into the sky. Colorful glazed bricks reflected brilliant light beside the riverbanks. The city no longer looked merely human in scale. It seemed almost mythic. And at the center of it all stood Nebuchadnezzar, the ruler whose dream transformed Babylon into the golden city of the ancient world. Yet even while the empire flourished beneath his rule, time continued moving quietly forward like the Euphrates itself. No city, no matter how magnificent, could remain untouched forever by the slow and patient currents of history. Travelers approaching Babylon during the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II often saw the city long before they reached its walls. Across the flat Mesopotamian plains, rising above the shimmering heat and drifting desert dust, enormous fortifications appeared beside the Euphrates like something imagined from a dream. Caravans slowed as merchants, pilgrims, diplomats, and wandering travelers stared toward the distant capital whose reputation had already spread across the ancient world. But nothing prepared them for the Ishtar Gate. As visitors moved closer along the grand processional way, the city entrance emerged in astonishing color beneath the sunlight. Towering high above the road stood walls covered in deep blue glazed bricks that reflected the brightness of the sky itself. The gate seemed almost unreal against the pale desert landscape surrounding it, glowing like polished sapphire beneath the burning Mesopotamian sun. Across its surface marched sacred animals formed from carefully shaped colored bricks. Golden lions stretched proudly along the walls beside powerful bulls and dragon-like creatures known as Mu-S-U, symbols connected to Babylon's gods and royal authority. Every figure carried meaning. Every detail reflected power, protection, and divine favor bestowed upon the city. The gate was named after Ishtar, goddess of love, war, beauty, and fertility. Her presence was believed to watch over Babylon itself. During religious festivals, priests and musicians passed beneath the enormous archways carrying sacred statues through streets filled with incense smoke, chanting voices, and flickering torchlight. The city entrance became more than architecture. It became ceremony, belief, and imperial identity carved into brilliant stone. At sunset, the Ishtar Gate transformed once again. Warm orange light touched the blue glazed surfaces while long shadows stretched across the processional way. Torch flames flickered against the walls after darkness arrived, causing the golden animal figures to shimmer softly beneath the night sky. Travelers entering Babylon during these hours must have felt they were crossing into a city touched by something larger than ordinary human ambition. Inside the gates, the capital unfolded in overwhelming scale. Wide ceremonial roads led deeper into Babylon toward massive temples, crowded marketplaces, royal palaces, and towering walls that seemed endless beside the Euphrates River. The sounds of the city drifted outward constantly, merchants bargaining, musicians playing stringed instruments, priests chanting prayers beneath temple roofs, and distant footsteps echoing across stone pathways worn smooth by generation. Yet the Ishtar Gate remained the emotional threshold of Babylon itself. It was the first sight greeting foreign visitors and the final image seen by travelers departing into the open deserts beyond Mesopotamia. Through those gates passed armies, caravans, ambassadors, scholars, and kings. Beneath its towering archways flowed both the ordinary routines of daily life and the extraordinary ceremonies of empire. And perhaps that was exactly what Nebuchadnezzar intended. He wanted Babylon to inspire awe before anyone even entered its streets. The Ishtar Gate announced immediately that this was no ordinary city beside a river. This was Babylon, radiant, powerful, and magnificent beneath the endless heavens of the ancient world. Beyond the Great Blue Gate waited even greater wonders still. Somewhere inside the city, hidden among palace terraces and rising gardens, lay the legendary beauty that would one day become one of history's greatest mysteries. Deep within the heart of Babylon, beyond the blue brilliance of the Ishtar Gate and the crowded ceremonial roads, ancient stories speak of a place unlike anything the world had ever seen. Rising above the warm plains of Mesopotamia, sheltered beside palace walls and flowing water channels, stood the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a wonder so beautiful that centuries later people still questioned whether such a place could truly have existed. The ancient world was filled mostly with stone, clay, dust, and sunburned earth. Mesopotamia itself stretched outward in flat golden plains beneath fierce summer skies. Yet within Babylon, according to travelers and storytellers, lush terraces climbed toward the heavens covered in trees. Flowering vines, palms, cypress, and rare plants gathered from distant regions of the empire. Water flowed constantly through the garden. This alone made the wonder seem almost impossible. In a land where survival depended upon careful irrigation and the unpredictable rivers, the idea of elevated gardens overflowing with greenery appeared miraculous. Some accounts described enormous terraces stacked one above another like artificial hills rising over the city. Stone stairways climbed between shaded walkways while cool water trickled softly beside exotic flowers whose fragrance drifted through the warm evening air. Perhaps during the hottest hours of the day, when Babylon's streets shimmered beneath relentless sunlight, the gardens offered relief unlike anywhere else in the empire. Beneath broad leaves and hanging vines, shadows moved gently across polished stone while fountains cooled the air beside quiet pools reflecting the sky above. Birds rested among fruit trees carried from distant mountains and valleys far beyond Mesopotamia's flat horizon. Ancient stories often connected the gardens to Nebuchadnezzar II and a queen who missed the green, mountainous landscapes of her homeland. Wanting to comfort her within the dry plains of Babylon, the king supposedly ordered an entire paradise built beside the palace itself. Whether fully true or softened by centuries of retelling, the story carried emotional beauty that survived long after the empire disappeared. At night, the Hanging Gardens must have felt almost dreamlike. Moonlight touched flowing water while oil lamps glowed softly beneath stone archways hidden among leaves and flowers. Cool winds drifted through elevated terraces carrying the scent of cedar, jasmine, wet earth, and river water upward into the darkness. Below the gardens stretched the immense city of Babylon itself, temple fires flickering beside the Euphrates while distant voices echoed softly through sleeping streets. Some travelers may have stood there in silence, looking across Babylon from the shaded heights while stars filled the Mesopotamian sky above them. In those moments, the city probably felt eternal, and yet the Hanging Gardens remain one of history's great mysteries. No clear ruins have ever been found that unquestionably prove their existence in Babylon exactly as ancient writers described them. Some historians believe the gardens may have been exaggerated through generations of storytelling. Others suggest they may have existed in another city entirely before becoming connected to Babylon's legend over time. Ancient ancient records themselves are incomplete, fragmented by war, erosion, and thousands of years of disappearance. But perhaps certainty is not the reason the Hanging Gardens endured within human memory for so long. The gardens represented something deeper than architecture alone. They symbolized humanity's desire to create beauty against harshness, life against emptiness, paradise against the unforgiving realities of the ancient world. In the middle of hot winds, dusty roads, and endless plains, Babylon imagined forests suspended above the earth itself. Even today, the image remains strangely powerful, terraces overflowing with greenery beside moonlit palace walls while water flows endlessly through the heart of the desert. And somewhere within that mystery, the spirit of Babylon continues living on, suspended between history and dream beneath the stars of the ancient world. Above the flowing waters of the Euphrates, rising behind massive fortified walls and guarded entrances, stood the royal palace of Babylon. During the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II, the palace became one of the grandest centers of power in the ancient world, a place of wealth, ceremony, silence, and constant observation beneath the Mesopotamian sky. From the river below, the palace appeared enormous. Terraces climbed high above the city, while polished walls reflected sunlight across the water during the day and torchlight after nightfall. Guards carrying bronze spears watched from elevated walkways overlooking both Babylon's crowded streets and the endless plains stretching beyond the distant walls. The palace was not simply a residence. It was the visible heart of imperial authority itself. Inside the royal complex, cool corridors wound through vast chambers decorated with painted walls, carved reliefs, and glazed bricks shimmering beneath oil lamps. Cedar wood imported from distant mountains supported high ceilings scented faintly with incense and smoke. Servants moved quietly through the halls carrying water, wine, fruit, and messages sealed in clay. Every corner of the palace reflected discipline, ritual, and controlled elegance. During the daytime hours, the palace rarely rested. Advisors gathered around the king discussing trade routes, diplomacy, taxes, military movements, and reports arriving from across the empire. Scribes pressed symbols carefully into clay tablets, while messengers traveled constantly between the palace gates and distant territories under Babylonian control. Decisions made within these chambers shaped the lives of countless people far beyond the city itself. Yet despite its luxury, palace life could also feel strangely isolated. Kings lived surrounded by servants, guards, officials, and ceremony, but rarely by ordinary simplicity. Every conversation carried political meaning. Every alliance required caution. Trust itself became difficult within the center of an empire where power attracted both loyalty and ambition. Even moments of quiet were watched carefully by attendants standing silently near shadowed walls. Perhaps this was why the elevated terraces overlooking the Euphrates held special importance for Babylon's rulers. In the evenings, after the fierce heat of the day began fading, cooler winds drifted upward from the river carrying the scent of water and distant gardens into the palace heights. From there, the king could watch Babylon glowing beneath torchlight while boats moved slowly along the darkened river below. The city must have looked magnificent at night. Temple fires flickered softly against the skyline while music floated upward from hidden courtyards inside the sleeping neighborhood. Market lanterns glowed beside narrow streets where merchants finished their final conversations beneath the stars. Somewhere in the distance, priests climbed temple stairways to study the heavens while the Euphrates reflected moonlight through the center of the ancient capital. Inside the palace, musicians sometimes played gentle melodies during evening banquets attended by nobles, diplomats, and visiting rulers from foreign lands. Bronze cups shimmered beneath candlelight while servants poured wine beside tables filled with dates, figs, roasted meats, and honeyed breads. Laughter echoed softly through the great halls while dancers moved gracefully across polished floors. And yet beyond all the luxury remained the quiet awareness that even Babylon's greatness could not stop time itself. Empires rose, empires faded, rivers continued flowing beneath the stars. Perhaps on certain nights, standing above the Euphrates while warm winds crossed the palace terraces, even the kings of Babylon sensed how fragile human glory truly was despite all the beauty surrounding them. From the earliest hours of morning until long after sunset, the markets of Babylon pulsed with movement beside the Euphrates River. They were more than places of trade. They were gathering points for languages, cultures, ideas, and stories flowing together from across the ancient world. Within the city's crowded streets, humanity itself seemed to converge beneath the towering walls of Babylon. At dawn, merchants opened wooden stalls beneath woven shades while the first light of morning touched the rooftops with soft gold. Dust drifted gently through narrow streets already alive with footsteps and distant voices. Donkeys carrying sacks of grain moved beside carts loaded with pottery, cedar wood, copper tools, spices, woven cloth, and jars of fragrant oils brought from lands far beyond Mesopotamia. The air itself felt rich with scent and sound. Fresh bread baked beside the marketplaces filled the streets with warmth, while incense smoke curled upward from nearby temple courtyards. Traders from distant deserts carried spices whose unfamiliar fragrances drifted through the crowds beside perfumes stored inside delicate carved containers. Fish freshly pulled from the Euphrates glistened beneath morning sunlight, while dates, figs, lentils, and pomegranates overflowed from woven baskets arranged carefully across shaded tables. Everywhere, voices blended into a constant living rhythm. Some merchants spoke Akkadian, the language of Babylon itself. Others arrived speaking Egyptian, Persian, Phoenician, or dialects carried from distant mountain kingdoms and coastal cities beside faraway seas. Travelers exchanged news about wars, harvests, rulers, storms, and caravan routes, while scribes sat patiently nearby recording agreements onto clay tablets pressed carefully with styluses. For many visitors, Babylon must have felt impossibly vast and alive. The city connected enormous trade routes stretching across the ancient world. Boats moved constantly along the Euphrates carrying cargo north and south through Mesopotamia, while caravans crossed dangerous deserts to reach Babylon's profitable market. Gold, ivory, lapis lazuli, rare woods, wool, silver, and gemstones all passed through the city's hands before continuing onward to distant kingdoms. Along the processional way near the great temples, wealth and poverty existed side by side. Nobles dressed in embroidered garments walked past laborers carrying bricks beneath the burning afternoon heat. Wealthy merchants negotiated enormous trade deals, while children chased one another through crowded alleyways nearby. Musicians played stringed instruments beneath shaded courtyards, while fortune tellers whispered predictions to curious travelers beside the road. Yet despite its size and complexity, Babylon's marketplaces also carried moments of surprising calm. In the late evening, after the fiercest heat had faded and the sun lowered beyond the western plains, cooler winds drifted through the city. Lanterns glowed softly beside market stalls, while merchants finished quiet conversations beneath the deepening blue sky. The Euphrates reflected flickering torchlight through the center of Babylon as boats moved silently along the dark water. Somewhere nearby, a traveler arriving from hundreds of miles away might pause beside the crowded streets and realize they had reached the very center of the known world. Babylon was no longer simply a powerful city. It had become a meeting place for civilizations themselves, a place where cultures mixed beneath towering walls while human knowledge, ambition, trade, and imagination flowed together beside the ancient river. And within this extraordinary city, scholars and astronomers continued studying the heavens above, quietly building knowledge that would outlive even Babylon's golden age beneath the stars. When the noise of Babylon's crowded markets finally softened beneath the evening sky, another world awakened quietly above the city. High upon temple terraces and inside chambers lit by oil lamps, scholars gathered beside stacks of clay tablets while the stars slowly appeared over Mesopotamia. The Empire of Babylon was built not only through armies and wealth, but through observation, memory, and an extraordinary hunger to understand the patterns hidden within the world itself. The priests and scholars of Babylon studied nearly everything surrounding them. They observed rivers, weather, harvests, trade records, eclipses, shadows, numbers, and the movements of celestial bodies crossing the heavens above the Euphrates. Generation after generation, knowledge accumulated carefully upon clay tablets stored inside temple archives where dry desert air preserved human thought across centuries. At night, the rooftops of Babylon became places of quiet concentration. Wrapped in long robes against the cooler desert winds, astronomer priests watched the sky with remarkable patience. The moon drifted slowly above the city walls while constellations rotated across the darkness in patterns repeated year after year. Using simple instruments and endless dedication, Babylonian scholars tracked planetary movements with astonishing precision for the ancient world. They recorded eclipses, they predicted seasonal cycles, they mapped the heavens carefully onto clay. To them, astronomy was not separate from spirituality. The stars were believed to carry divine meaning, revealing messages from powers greater than humanity itself. Every unusual celestial event inspired careful study. A bright comet, an eclipse, or the wandering movement of a planet could influence decisions made by priests, kings, and advisors throughout the empire. Yet beyond religion, Babylonian scholarship also helped shape mathematics, timekeeping, and organized record systems that influenced civilizations far beyond Mesopotamia. Inside Inside quiet temple rooms illuminated by flickering lamps, scribes pressed tiny wedge-shaped symbols into soft clay using sharpened reed. Their writing system, known today as cuneiform, allowed information to survive long after spoken voices disappeared. Records of harvests, laws, trade agreements, taxes, astronomy, and literature filled thousands of tablets carefully stored upon shelves inside palace and temple archive. The scholars of Babylon also developed mathematical systems far more advanced than many people today imagine. They used complex calculations to organize trade, engineering, architecture, and astronomical observation. Their number system, based partly around the number 60, still echoes faintly through the modern world whenever people measure hours, minutes, or circles. And perhaps most remarkable of all was their understanding of time itself. While ordinary citizens slept inside quiet homes beside the river, Babylonian scholars measured the heavens with extraordinary discipline beneath endless stars. Night after night, century after century, they searched for order hidden within the movements of the universe. The sky became both a source of wonder and a vast cosmic clock turning silently above human civilization. One can almost imagine those quiet nights atop the temple terraces, the Euphrates flowing dark beneath the city walls, warm winds crossing the rooftops, oil lamps glowing softly beside rows of clay tablets, and above everything, the immense ancient sky stretching endlessly beyond human understanding. Babylon often appears in memory as a city of wealth, gardens, and imperial grandeur. Yet it was also a city of thinkers, observers, and record keepers whose knowledge survived long after its kings vanished into history. But even the wisest civilizations could not fully escape the slow changes approaching beyond their borders. Far from Babylon's glowing temples and scholarly halls, rival powers continued rising beneath distant horizons, waiting patiently while the golden city reached the height of its glory. Beyond the magnificent walls of Babylon, beyond its glowing temples and crowded markets beside the Euphrates, the ancient world continued shifting quietly beneath restless skies. Other kingdoms watched the rise of Babylon carefully. Some admired its wealth and power, others feared it. And far beyond the reach of the city's towers, new empires slowly gathered strength in silence. At the height of its glory, Babylon must have seemed eternal. Its armies controlled enormous territories, its scholars studied the heavens, its rulers commanded one of the richest cities on earth. Travelers arriving from distant lands carried stories of towering gates, hanging gardens, and endless wealth protected behind massive walls. Yet throughout history, greatness has often attracted the attention of rivals the way fire attracts wandering eyes through darkness. Messengers arrived constantly at Babylon's palace carrying reports from distant borders. Some brought news of alliances between neighboring kingdoms, others described unrest in conquered territories where loyalty to Babylon remained uncertain beneath the surface calm. Small rebellions flickered occasionally like sparks in dry grass before being extinguished by imperial authority. Still, the empire's rulers understood an uncomfortable truth. No kingdom remained unchallenged forever. Far to the east, new powers expanded steadily across rugged landscapes and mountain passes. In the north, ambitious rulers strengthened armies while watching Babylon's dominance over Mesopotamia with cautious calculation. Along distant trade routes, merchants whispered rumors about shifting alliances, growing military campaigns, and rulers who dreamed of expanding their own influence beneath the same ancient stars. Inside Babylon itself, life continued beautifully. Markets remained crowded with merchants selling spices, fabrics, oils, and carved treasures from distant civilization. Temple ceremonies filled the nights with chanting and torchlight. Boats drifted calmly along the Euphrates beneath moonlit skies while musicians played softly inside hidden courtyards. The city still radiated confidence and grandeur at every level, yet beneath that beauty, subtle unease slowly emerged. The empire had become enormous, and enormous empires required endless resources to maintain control. Armies had to be supplied, roads repaired, governors monitored, conquered populations managed carefully before resentment turned toward rebellion. Even within the palace halls, advisors debated threats arriving from beyond Babylon's borders while maps spread across long wooden tables beneath flickering lamps. Sometimes, during the quiet hours before dawn, the city must have felt strangely fragile despite all its wealth. Warm winds crossed the palace terraces overlooking the dark river below, while guards stood silently along the walls scanning distant horizons fading into darkness. Somewhere beyond those unseen plains, rival kingdoms prepared their own futures while Babylon rested believing its greatness secure. The priests atop the temple towers continued studying the stars as they always had. Perhaps they searched the heavens for signs of danger approaching the empire. Perhaps they saw patterns that troubled them in ways ordinary citizens never understood. Ancient civilizations often believed destiny revealed itself first through the movements of the sky. But for most people inside Babylon, daily life still moved peacefully forward. Families shared evening meals beneath lantern light. Merchants bargained in crowded streets. Children laughed beside the riverbanks while temple fires glowed softly against the night. And yet history itself was already beginning to shift beyond the walls. The greatest cities in the world are often surrounded not only by admiration, but by watching eyes filled with patience, ambition, and quiet hunger for power. Babylon, for all its magnificence, could not remain untouched forever by the shadows gathering slowly across the ancient world. As Babylon's empire expanded across Mesopotamia, the burden of maintaining such greatness grew heavier with every passing year. From a distance, the city still appeared magnificent beyond imagination, its blue gates gleaming beneath the sun, its temples rising toward the heavens, its markets overflowing with wealth from distant lands. Yet behind the beauty and ceremony, enormous effort was required to hold the empire together. Every road crossing the kingdom demanded maintenance. Every canal feeding the fertile fields required laborers to clear mud and repair collapsing walls after seasonal floods. Armies stationed along distant borders needed food, weapons, animals, and constant payment. Messengers traveled endlessly between cities carrying royal orders across territories so vast that many citizens would never see the edges of the empire they belonged to. Inside Babylon, taxes increased gradually to support this growing system. Farmers surrendered portions of their harvests after months working beneath the scorching sun. Merchants paid fees on goods arriving through the city gates. Laborers spent long days constructing walls, temples, and roads whose scale reflected imperial ambition but also consumed endless resources. Even prosperity carried weight beneath the surface calm. At night, after the crowded markets emptied and the heat finally loosened its grip upon the city, ordinary people sometimes gathered quietly beneath oil lamps discussing rising costs, military campaigns, and uncertain rumors drifting inward from distant territories. The empire still appeared powerful, yet many understood how much effort was required to preserve that appearance. Perhaps this is the hidden truth carried by all great civilizations. The larger an empire becomes, the more fragile its balance often grows. Babylon's rulers continued presenting confidence to the world beyond their walls. Ceremonies filled the processional way with music and torchlight. Priests offered prayers beneath towering temples while royal officials spoke proudly of the empire's strength. Yet inside palace chambers lit softly by flickering lamps, advisors increasingly debated difficult problems with careful voices and tired eyes. Some conquered regions resisted Babylonian control more openly than before. Distant governors requested additional soldiers to maintain order. Trade routes occasionally became dangerous as unrest spread quietly through border territories. And beyond Mesopotamia, rival powers continued strengthening themselves while studying Babylon's enormous but increasingly stretched empire. Even the city itself carried signs of strain hidden beneath its beauty. Workers repaired canals damaged by floods. Guards doubled patrols along important walls and gates. Scribes filled endless clay tablets recording taxes, supplies, troop movements, and disputes arriving from across the kingdom. The machinery of empire never truly rested. Yet despite all these pressures, Babylon still remained breathtaking beneath the night sky. Moonlight shimmered across the Euphrates while warm winds drifted through palace terraces and crowded neighborhoods alike. Music floated softly through hidden courtyards beside the scent of bread, incense, and river water. The city still glowed with extraordinary life even while invisible cracks slowly formed beneath its golden surface. Perhaps that is why decline often arrives so quietly at first. Great civilizations rarely collapse in a single dramatic moment. More often, exhaustion gathers slowly through years of pressure, ambition, and the endless struggle to preserve power against time itself. And somewhere beyond Babylon's distant horizons, new rulers were already rising beneath foreign skies, watching carefully while the great city carried the growing weight of its own magnificence. After the long reign of Nebuchadnezzar II, Babylon still stood magnificent beside the Euphrates. Its towering walls remained strong. Its temples continued glowing beneath torchlight and stars. Merchants still crowded the markets, while priests climbed temple stairways to study the heavens above the city. To distant travelers, Babylon appeared unchanged, eternal even. But inside the palace, something quieter had begun to fade. Great rulers often leave behind enormous shadows, and the kings who followed Nebuchadnezzar struggled to carry the weight of the empire he had built. Some inherited power without possessing his discipline, patience, or vision. Others became trapped within palace rivalries, political uncertainty, and the endless pressures that accompanied imperial rule. Slowly, the confidence that once defined Babylon began softening into hesitation. Within the royal halls overlooking the river, advisors whispered more carefully than before. Alliances shifted quietly behind carved doors illuminated by oil lamps late into the night. Some officials competed for influence while distant governors tested the limits of royal authority far beyond the capital's walls. The empire still functioned, but its center no longer felt entirely stable. Outside the palace, ordinary citizens may not have immediately recognized the change. The markets remained alive with trade. Boats still drifted along the Euphrates carrying grain, textiles, spices, and timber through the city's busy dock. Temple ceremonies filled the nights with music and incense. Yet beneath the familiar rhythms of daily life lingered a growing sense of uncertainty difficult to fully explain. Perhaps people noticed how royal decisions became less decisive than before. Perhaps soldiers returning from distant territories carried troubling stories about weakening control along the empire's borders. Or perhaps the city itself simply felt different beneath the stars, quieter somehow, less certain of its future despite all its beauty. Inside the palace, rulers came and went more quickly than during Babylon's golden years. Some kings focused on preserving luxury rather than strengthening stability. Others faced internal divisions that slowly weakened trust between the throne and powerful figures throughout the empire. Political struggles unfolded behind decorated walls, while outside, the vast machinery of Babylon continued operating through habit, tradition, and momentum built over generations. At night, warm desert winds still crossed the palace terraces while the Euphrates flowed endlessly through darkness below. Yet even these peaceful scenes carried traces of melancholy now. Guards standing watch beneath torchlight understood that neighboring powers were growing stronger beyond Mesopotamia. Messengers arrived more frequently with urgent reports from distant provinces. The certainty of Babylon's dominance no longer felt unquestionable. History often changes this way, not through sudden collapse, but through gradual weakening hidden beneath outward splendor. The temples still stood tall. The gates still shone blue beneath sunlight. The gardens still whispered beside flowing water. But the spirit of confidence that once drove Babylon toward greatness had begun quietly fading within the hearts of those who ruled it. And far beyond the empire's eastern horizons, another power was already rising beneath foreign skies. Its armies moved steadily across mountains and deserts under the leadership of a ruler whose ambition would soon reshape the ancient world forever. Far beyond the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, beyond Babylon's shining temples and crowded river markets, another civilization was rising quietly beneath distant skies. In the rugged lands east of the great rivers, among mountains, deserts, and high plateaus swept by cold winds, the Persians were building an empire whose discipline and ambition would soon reshape the ancient world. At first, Babylon likely viewed Persia as only one power among many. Empires had always risen and fallen beyond Mesopotamia's borders. Kings appeared, conquered neighboring territories, and eventually disappeared into history while Babylon endured beside the Euphrates. Yet the Persians expanded differently. Their growth felt steady, patient, and strangely unstoppable, guided by a ruler whose name would echo across centuries with unusual respect, Cyrus the Great. Stories about Cyrus traveled slowly into Babylon through merchants, travelers, diplomats, and uneasy political reports arriving from distant land. He was described not merely as a conqueror, but as a leader capable of uniting diverse peoples beneath organized rule. Kingdom after kingdom fell under Persian influence, while their armies crossed enormous distances with remarkable speed and discipline. Inside Babylon's palace, advisors studied maps beneath flickering oil lamps while discussing Persia's growing power with increasing concern. Territories once thought secure now seemed vulnerable. Alliances shifted quietly as neighboring rulers reconsidered their loyalty to Babylon's weakening empire. Some kingdoms even welcomed Persian influence, believing Cyrus offered stability where older powers had grown exhausted. And still Babylon remained magnificent. The Ishtar Gate continued glowing blue beneath the Mesopotamian sun. Temple priests climbed sacred stairways beneath endless constellations. Music drifted through palace courtyards beside the scent of incense and river water. To ordinary citizens, daily life often appeared appeared unchanged despite the distant rumors spreading through the markets. But history was already moving closer. The Persian Empire expanded like a slow approaching horizon visible long before arrival. Its armies crossed mountains, deserts, and fertile valleys with calm determination rather than reckless destruction. Cyrus understood diplomacy as well as warfare. Cities that surrendered peacefully were often treated with surprising restraint compared to the brutal conquests common throughout the ancient world. This made Persia even more dangerous. Fear alone can inspire resistance, but disciplined mercy sometimes weakens enemies before battles even begin. Throughout the ancient world, rulers watched Persia's rise with a mixture of admiration and dread, while Babylon struggled increasingly with internal uncertainty after the death of Nebuchadnezzar. At night, warm winds still crossed Babylon's rooftops, while the Euphrates reflected moonlight through the sleeping city. Guards stood watch upon the walls, staring outward into darkness, stretching endlessly toward unseen land. Somewhere far beyond those horizons, Persian soldiers rested beside campfires beneath unfamiliar stars while their empire continued moving steadily westward. Perhaps some citizens of Babylon sensed change approaching even if they could not fully explain why. The city still possessed wealth beyond imagination. Its walls still stood enormous and proud. Its temples still glowed beneath the heavens. Yet beneath all the beauty lingered a quiet feeling that the world surrounding Babylon was changing faster than the empire itself could understand. And on distant nights beneath foreign skies, Cyrus the Great continued preparing for the moment when his gaze would finally turn toward the legendary city beside the Euphrates, the golden capital whose greatness had once seemed eternal beneath the stars. Night settled gently over Babylon on the eve of its fall. The great city still glowed with beauty beside the Euphrates, unaware that history stood quietly at its gates. Warm winds drifted through the streets carrying the familiar scents of river water, incense, baked bread, and distant temple fires. Above the rooftops, countless stars shimmered across the Mesopotamian sky exactly as they had for generations, while the city rested beneath them with calm and ancient confidence. Inside the markets, merchants finished their final conversations beneath hanging lanterns before covering their goods for the night. Boats rocked softly against the river docks while musicians played slow melodies from hidden courtyards tucked between mud brick homes. Families gathered together for evening meals as children slowly drifted toward sleep beneath open windows where cooler air moved gently through the darkness. To most citizens, Babylon still felt eternal. Its walls remained enormous. Its gates still guarded the entrances to the empire. Its temples still rose proudly beneath the heavens. Yet beyond the visible calm, uncertainty moved quietly through the palace halls and guarded corridors overlooking the river. Messengers arrived late into the evening carrying troubling reports from the outer territories. Persian forces under Cyrus the Great had drawn dangerously close to Babylon's borders. Some advisors urged preparation for siege and resistance. Others feared the empire no longer possessed the unity or strength required for a prolonged conflict. Inside chambers illuminated by flickering oil lamps, anxious conversations continued long after midnight. Outside the palace, however, the city itself remained strangely peaceful. Priests climbed temple stairways carrying incense toward sacred fires burning beneath the stars. Astronomers studied the heavens from elevated terraces while recording the movements of planets and moonlight onto clay tablets with careful hands. Somewhere near the riverbanks, fishermen repaired nets beside small fires glowing softly against the dark water. The ordinary rhythms of life continued even while the future approached silently through the night. Perhaps this is what makes Babylon's final evening feel so haunting centuries later. There was no great panic, no roaring battle outside the walls, no desperate crowds fleeing into the darkness, only stillness. Only uncertainty suspended beneath the ancient sky. The Euphrates flowed quietly through the heart of the city while guards watched from the walls scanning distant horizons barely visible beneath moonlight. Somewhere far beyond the sleeping plains, Persian soldiers rested calmly in organized camps awaiting the next movement of history itself. Their fires flickered faintly beneath foreign stars while Babylon slept believing morning would arrive like every morning before it. Inside the royal palace, torchlight reflected against polished walls and silent corridors. Servants moved carefully through shadowed halls while exhausted officials studied maps spread across wooden tables. Even among the empire's rulers, there may have remained hope that Babylon's legendary strength would protect it once again. But time had already shifted. Empires do not always recognize the exact moment their golden age quietly ends. And so Babylon rested peacefully on its final night of unquestioned greatness, beautiful, weary, uncertain, and illuminated softly beneath the endless heavens, while history waited patiently beyond the walls beside the dark flowing river. The gates of Babylon did not fall beneath roaring flames or endless waves of destruction. No great battle shattered the city walls. No final storm of violence consumed the golden capital beside the Euphrates. Instead, one of history's greatest cities passed quietly into another empire with a silence that still feels haunting thousands of years later. As dawn slowly approached over Mesopotamia, the air above Babylon remained calm. The Euphrates flowed steadily through the sleeping city while pale morning light touched the temple towers and palace walls. Guards still stood watch along the fortification, though many already understood that the balance of power had shifted beyond recovery. Some ancient accounts suggest the Persians entered the city through waterways connected to the river itself after diverting parts of the Euphrates. Others describe Babylon surrendering with limited resistance as support for its rulers weakened internally. The exact details remain uncertain after so many centuries, yet nearly every story agrees upon one remarkable truth. Babylon did not die in chaos, it surrendered in silence. When the forces of Cyrus the Great entered the city, many citizens likely woke to confusion rather than terror. The streets still stood intact beneath the morning sky. Markets remained standing. Temples continued rising above the rooftops. Life itself had not suddenly vanished, only the empire ruling it had changed. Perhaps that is what made the moment feel so unreal. Inside palace chambers, exhausted officials realized Babylon's long age of supremacy had ended. The rulers who once commanded the greatest city in Mesopotamia no longer controlled its future. Outside, Persian soldiers moved carefully through the streets while citizens watched uncertainly from doorways and shaded courtyards. Yet the feared destruction many expected never fully arrived. Cyrus understood the value of preserving great cities rather than destroying them. Babylon's wealth, knowledge, and strategic importance made it far too valuable to reduce to ruin. Temples remained respected. Religious traditions largely continued. Daily life adapted slowly beneath Persian authority instead of collapsing all at once. Still, something invisible had changed forever. The golden age of Babylon was over. The city that once stood at the center of the ancient world no longer shaped history with the same confidence and power. Its walls still towered beside the Euphrates. Its gardens still whispered beneath the wind. Its scholars still studied the heavens from temple rooftops. Yet Babylon itself had become part of another empire story. At night, the city probably looked much the same as before. Torchlight flickered along familiar streets. The river reflected moonlight through the darkness. Music drifted softly from hidden courtyards. But beneath the peaceful beauty lingered the quiet realization that an era had ended. Empires often imagine themselves eternal while they rise beneath the stars. Yet even the greatest civilizations eventually fade into memory, replaced by new powers carrying their own dreams of permanence into the uncertain future. And so Babylon entered its long decline not through sudden destruction, but through a gentle surrender to time, history, and the slow turning of human ambition across generations. The city beside the Euphrates would survive for centuries more, but never again would it hold the same place within the imagination of the world. Its glory had already begun drifting softly into legend beneath the ancient Mesopotamian sky. Before the first light of dawn touched the walls of Babylon, the city rested in deep blue silence beside the Euphrates River. Cool air drifted softly through the narrow streets while the stars still shimmered above the sleeping rooftops. Somewhere in the darkness, dogs barked faintly near the outer gates, and temple fires glowed like distant embers beneath the fading night sky. Inside a modest mud-brick home tucked along one of the quieter streets, a young girl quietly opened her eyes before the rest of her family awoke. Around her, the house remained still. Her younger brothers slept beneath woven blankets while faint candlelight flickered against the walls from a nearly extinguished oil lamp. Beyond the open courtyard above her, she could hear the soft movement of wind carrying the scent of river water into the city. Carefully, so she would not disturb the others, she lifted a clay water jar and stepped outside into the cool pre-dawn air. Babylon looked different at this hour. The crowded markets were silent now. Merchant stalls stood empty beneath hanging cloth coverings, while narrow alleyways stretched peacefully between rows of sleeping homes. Overhead, the final stars slowly disappeared as pale silver light spread across the horizon beyond beyond the Euphrates. The enormous temples of the city rose quietly above the rooftops, their silhouettes dark against the brightening sky. The girl walked steadily toward the river alongside other early risers carrying jars, baskets, and tools for the coming day. Some women spoke softly together while fishermen prepared narrow boats along the shore. Nearby, priests in long robes moved silently toward temple stairways where morning rituals would soon begin beneath the first sunlight. At the riverbank, the Euphrates flowed calm and dark beside the city walls. She knelt carefully at the water's edge and lowered the clay jar into the cool current. Ripples spread gently across the surface while birds called from the reeds nearby. For a few quiet moments, the world felt suspended between night and morning, between silence and movement. Then Babylon slowly awakened. The distant sound of bronze bells echoed from a temple courtyard. Bakers lit their ovens while thin columns of smoke curled upward into the growing light. Donkeys pulling supply carts moved through the streets as laborers prepared for another long day beneath the Mesopotamian sun. Voices gradually filled the air beside the sound of footsteps, splashing water and creaking wooden wheels rolling across stone pathways. Returning home with the heavy jar balanced carefully against her shoulder, the girl passed craftsmen opening workshops and merchants arranging baskets of dates, lentils, and barley outside market stalls. Warm bread scents drifted through the streets while sunlight finally touched the upper temple towers with glowing gold. Inside her home, the courtyard now buzzed softly with life. Her mother prepared the morning meal while her father repaired fishing nets before leaving for the river dock. Her brothers laughed sleepily beside the doorway while sunlight spread slowly across the mud brick walls surrounding them. To the kings ruling from palace terraces high above the city, Babylon was an empire of wealth, power, and monuments beneath the heavens. But to ordinary people like this young girl, Babylon was something simpler and more intimate. It was the sound of water before sunrise, the warmth of bread ovens awakening in darkness, the comfort of familiar streets beneath ancient stars, and the quiet rhythm of everyday life continuing beside the eternal flow of the Euphrates River. Long after the markets of Babylon had fallen quiet and most homes rested beneath the stars, small lights still glowed inside the temple archives near the heart of the city. Within cool chambers lined with shelves of clay tablets, scribes continued their work in near silence while oil lamps flickered softly against ancient walls darkened by years of smoke and incense. Among them sat a young scribe wrapped in simple linen robes, his posture bent carefully over wet clay resting upon a wooden table. Around him stretched thousands of records preserving the memory of Babylon itself: trade agreements, tax collections, astronomical observations, royal decrees, poems, prayers, harvest reports, and stories carried forward from generations already gone. Outside, warm desert winds drifted gently through the temple courtyards. The Euphrates reflected moonlight beyond the walls while distant footsteps echoed faintly through sleeping streets. Yet inside the archive chambers, time seemed to move differently. The scribe pressed a sharpened reed carefully into the clay, one symbol, then another. Tiny wedge-shaped markings slowly filled the surface in neat rows beneath the trembling lamplight. Writing in Babylon required extraordinary patience. A single mistake could damage important records meant to survive for decades or even centuries. Young scribes trained for years learning mathematics, language, law, and the complex cuneiform writing system used throughout Mesopotamia. Many began their education as children inside temple schools where discipline and repetition shaped every lesson. For ordinary citizens, literacy remained rare. Most people spent their lives farming, trading, fishing, building, or serving the empire in practical ways. But scribes occupied a special place within Babylonian society because they preserved knowledge itself. Without them, laws could vanish, debts could be forgotten, trade could collapse into confusion, and history itself might disappear into silence. Inside the temple archives, shelves of hardened clay tablets stretched into darkness like rows of sleeping memories. Some recorded the movements of planets observed generations earlier from temple rooftops. Others preserved hymns sung during ceremonies beneath sacred fires. Some contained simple records of grain deliveries beside names long erased from human memory, except for the marks left in clay. At times, the young scribe paused from his work and listened. Somewhere beyond the chamber walls, priests climbed temple stairways beneath the stars for nighttime observation. Faint chanting drifted softly through the corridors while incense smoke curled upward into the darkness above. The city outside continued sleeping peacefully beside the river, unaware of how much of its existence depended upon quiet figures working beneath temple lamps through the night. Perhaps there was something deeply comforting about the work itself. In a world shaped constantly by floods, wars, rulers, and uncertainty, writing offered permanence. Clay preserved voices long after human lives ended. The scribes of Babylon understood that memory was fragile unless carefully protected against time. As the hours passed, the oil lamps burned lower while the city grew stiller beneath the heavens. One by one, completed tablets were placed carefully beside others waiting to dry before storage within the archive. And somewhere among those endless records resting beneath temple shadows survived the story of Babylon itself, its kings, its merchants, its astronomers, its workers, and its dreams beside the Euphrates River. Long after the empire faded, the quiet marks pressed into clay by patient hands would continue speaking softly across thousands of years beneath the ancient stars. For weeks, the merchant had traveled across deserts where the wind erased footprints almost as quickly as they appeared. His caravan moved slowly beneath enormous skies, carrying wool, carved ivory, fragrant oils, dyed fabrics, and polished stones gathered from kingdoms far beyond Mesopotamia. During the day, heat shimmered across the empty landscape like waves upon water. At night, the travelers rested beside small fires while camels groaned softly beneath the stars. And always ahead of them waited Babylon. Among merchants across the ancient world, the city possessed an almost mythical reputation. Stories about its towering walls, glittering gates, crowded markets, and endless wealth traveled farther than many armies ever could. Some traders spent years dreaming of seeing Babylon with their own eyes. At last, after crossing long roads lined with dust and silence, the merchant watched the city rise upon the horizon beside the Euphrates River. Even from a distance, Babylon seemed immense. Sunlight reflected against the blue-glazed bricks of the Ishtar Gate while temple towers climbed high above the surrounding plain. Smoke drifted upward from thousands of homes as boats moved steadily along the river carrying goods through the heart of the empire. Compared to the lonely deserts beyond the city, Babylon felt alive beyond imagination. As the caravan entered through the gates, the merchant found himself surrounded by voices from many lands. Traders from Egypt bargained beside men from distant mountain kingdoms. Phoenician sailors carried dyed cloth through crowded streets while Persian travelers negotiated for grain, silver, and livestock beneath hanging market lanterns. Different languages blended together beneath the warm afternoon air like the sound of flowing water. The merchant carefully guided his animals through the busy streets while staring upward at the city surrounding him. Temple walls rose beside enormous courtyards scented with incense and cedar smoke. Scribes sat beneath shaded awnings recording agreements onto clay tablets while musicians played stringed instruments nearby. Everywhere, movement filled the city, laborers carrying baskets of grain, nobles traveling beneath decorated canopies, priests climbing temple stairways, children racing through crowded alleys laughing beneath the sunlight. Babylon did not belong to one people alone. It had become a meeting place for civilizations themselves. Inside the marketplaces, the merchant displayed his goods beside hundreds of other traders arriving from distant lands. Spices filled the air with unfamiliar fragrances, while polished bronze tools glimmered beneath woven shades, protecting merchants from the fierce Mesopotamian heat. Fine fabrics imported from remote regions fluttered gently in the warm wind, while jewelers examined gemstones brought from mountains the Babylonians themselves would never see. At sunset, after the busiest trading hours had passed, the merchant walked quietly beside the Euphrates watching torchlight shimmer across the dark water. Boats drifted slowly through the river while music floated softly from hidden courtyards beyond the streets. Above the city, the first stars appeared over Babylon's temples and palace walls. Perhaps in that moment, standing beside the flowing river after crossing so much distance, the merchant understood why Babylon had become legendary across the ancient world. Not only because of its wealth, not only because of its king, but because within its walls, people from countless lands gathered together beneath one sky, carrying their stories, languages, goods, and dreams into the living heart of civilization itself. When the final light of evening faded beyond the plains of Mesopotamia, Babylon entered a quieter and more mysterious world. The crowded markets softened into silence, temple fires began glowing against the darkness, and the Euphrates reflected the rising moon like silver flowing through the center of the sleeping city. Above the rooftops stretched a sky so vast and clear that the stars appeared close enough to touch. For the priests of Babylon, these nighttime heavens were filled with meaning. Long after ordinary citizens returned to their homes and extinguished their lamps, figures in dark robes climbed the high stairways of the temples, servants carrying clay tablets, measuring tools, and small oil lanterns flickering softly in the warm desert wind. Their footsteps echoed gently against the ancient stone as they ascended toward the sacred terraces overlooking the city below. At the summit, Babylon unfolded beneath them in silence. Torchlight shimmered along distant streets. Palm trees swayed beside hidden courtyards. The river moved slowly through darkness beyond the palace walls. And overhead, the stars drifted endlessly across the heaven. The priests believed the sky revealed the hidden order guiding human destiny. Every movement of the moon, every wandering planet, every eclipse or unusual brightness carried possible messages from divine powers watching over the world below. To study the heavens was not simply science or religion alone. It was an attempt to understand the fragile connection between Earth and eternity. Night after night, the priests observed the stars with extraordinary patience. Some carefully recorded the positions of constellations onto clay tablets beneath dim lamplight. Others tracked the cycles of the moon or monitored the changing paths of visible planets moving slowly across the darkness over months and years. Their observations became remarkably accurate through generations of careful study passed from teacher to student beneath the temple roof. At times, complete silence settled over the terraces except for the sound of wind brushing across stone walls high above Babylon. In those moments, the city below must have seemed distant and small compared to the endless universe stretching overhead. Perhaps this was why the Babylonian priests developed such deep spiritual reverence for the heaven. The stars offered stability within an uncertain world. Empires could weaken, kings could die, floods could destroy harvests, but the constellations returned again and again with quiet precision beyond human control. During certain nights, important celestial events drew larger gatherings upon the temple rooftops. Priests lit ceremonial fires while chants echoed softly into the darkness beneath the moonlit sky. Citizens sometimes waited anxiously for interpretations of eclipses or unusual planetary alignments believed to influence wars, harvests, rulers, and the fate of entire kingdoms. And somewhere among the observers stood younger apprentices learning to read both the stars and the silence surrounding them. They memorized ancient patterns. They studied old records preserved upon hardened clay. They learned how to wait patiently beneath the heavens while the universe revealed itself slowly across the night. Far below the temple terraces, Babylon slept peacefully beside the Euphrates River. Families rested inside warm homes while guards stood watch along the walls and merchants dreamed of distant roads beyond the city gates. Yet above them all, the priests continued reading the sky beneath endless constellations glowing softly over the ancient world. And perhaps during those silent nights suspended between earth and stars, they sensed truths that even kings could never fully escape, that all civilizations, no matter how magnificent, remained small beneath the eternal heavens watching quietly above Babylon. As the heat of the Babylonian day slowly faded and long shadows stretched across the city streets, a gentler rhythm emerged within the homes and courtyards beside the Euphrates. Merchants closed their market stalls beneath hanging lanterns while warm evening winds drifted softly through the palm trees and mud brick alleyways. Above the rooftops, the sky deepened into rich shades of blue as the first stars quietly appeared over the ancient city. For many citizens, evening brought the most peaceful hours of the day. Inside open courtyards hidden behind thick walls, families gathered together beneath oil lamps glowing softly against the darkness. The scent of roasted grains, sweet dates, cedar smoke, and perfumed oils filled the warm night air while water trickled gently from small stone basins placed at the center of shaded gardens. After long hours of labor beneath the fierce Mesopotamian sun, people rested together in the comfort of familiar voices and music. Babylon loved beauty. Not only the beauty of temples and palace walls, but the quieter beauty carried through ordinary moments shared beneath the stars. Musicians often played during these evening gatherings using stringed instruments, drums, flutes, and small harps whose melodies drifted softly across neighboring rooftops. The music moved slowly and gracefully through the courtyards, blending with distant river sounds and the rustling leaves of date palms stirred by the night wind. Some melodies were joyful and lively. Others sounded ancient and almost dreamlike, carrying emotions difficult to explain with words alone. Children listened sleepily beside their parents while dancers moved gently across lantern-lit floors wearing flowing garments decorated with embroidered patterns and small shining ornaments that caught the flickering light. Nearby, servants poured wine and cool water into carved cups while quiet laughter echoed against the courtyard walls. Even wealthier homes inside Babylon often centered around these intimate nighttime spaces. Hidden from the crowded streets beyond, the courtyards created small worlds of calm within the vast vast empire surrounding them. Flowers climbed stone walls while woven carpets softened the ground beneath low wooden tables covered with fruit, bread, olives, and sweet cakes flavored with honey. Above everything stretched the endless heaven. The same stars watched over palace banquets, merchant homes, temple rooftops, and humble family gatherings alike. In Babylon, beauty was not reserved entirely for kings. Ordinary people also searched for comfort, art, companionship, and moments of peace beneath the uncertainty of life. Some evenings remained especially memorable. During festivals, larger crowds filled the streets with music and celebration while torches illuminated the city long after midnight. Drums echoed between the temple walls, perfumes drifted through the air, and dancers performed before audiences gathered beneath enormous constellations overhead. Babylon seemed almost suspended between reality and dream during such nights. And yet these simple human moments may have mattered most of all. Not the walls, not the army, not even the palaces, but the soft music floating through hidden courtyards while families rested together beside the river beneath the ancient stars. For it was within these quiet evenings of laughter, art, and companionship that Babylon truly lived, not only as an empire remembered by history, but as a home filled with ordinary human warmth carried gently through the night air of Mesopotamia. The old man liked sitting beside the Euphrates after sunset, long after the crowded streets of Babylon had begun growing quiet beneath the evening sky. Wrapped in faded robes softened by age and years of desert wind, he rested upon a low stone wall overlooking the slow dark river while torchlight shimmered gently across the moving water. Around him, the city still breathed with life. Music floated from distant courtyards. Merchants closed their final stalls beneath hanging lanterns. Temple fires glowed softly above the rooftops where priests climbed toward the stars. Yet to the old man, Babylon no longer felt quite the same as it once had. He remembered the golden years. He remembered when the city seemed invincible beneath the reign of mighty kings whose names filled the ancient world with awe. In his youth, Babylon's walls had appeared eternal, its markets endlessly prosperous, its ceremonies radiant with confidence and divine grandeur. Travelers arriving through the Ishtar Gate spoke with wonder in their voices while the streets overflowed with languages, perfumes, music, and ambition gathered from distant civilizations. The old man had once stood among those crowds himself. As a boy, he watched enormous processions move through the city beneath banners fluttering in the desert wind. Priests carried sacred statues beside musicians and soldiers, while citizens gathered shoulder to shoulder along the processional way. The hanging gardens still bloomed then, with flowing water and deep green shadows rising above the palace terraces. At night, Babylon glowed like a dream beside the Euphrates. Now, many years later, he carried those memories quietly within him while the world continued changing around the city. The Persians ruled Babylon now, the temples still stood, the markets still functioned. Life continued beneath the ancient stars much as it always had, and yet something invisible had faded. Perhaps it was certainty, perhaps it was pride, or perhaps greatness itself always feels different once remembered instead of lived. The old man watched boats drift slowly through the dark river while cool evening winds brushed against the palms nearby. Young children still laughed through the streets exactly as children always had. Musicians still played soft melodies beyond hidden courtyard walls. But many of the people surrounding him no longer remembered Babylon at the height of its glory. They knew only the quieter city that remained after the empire's golden age had already passed into history. Sometimes younger listeners gathered beside the old man asking him about earlier days. Were the gardens truly beautiful? Did the Ishtar Gate really shine blue beneath the sun? Was Babylon once the greatest city in the world? The old man answered slowly, his voice softened by memory. Yes, he told them, it truly was. But as the stars emerged one by one above the sleeping city, he also understood something deeper that only age often reveals. Nothing remains forever. Not kings, not empires, not even the grandest cities beside the rivers. And yet memory itself possesses a quiet kind of immortality. As long as stories survived, Babylon would never completely disappear. The old man lifted his eyes toward the heavens where the same constellations still moved silently above Mesopotamia, just as they had during his youth. The Euphrates continued flowing through darkness beneath the stars, carrying reflections of torchlight into the endless night, while Babylon slowly transformed from living empire into legend, remembered gently across generations. Centuries passed beside the Euphrates, and slowly the greatness of Babylon began dissolving into silence. The mighty city that once ruled the ancient world did not vanish all at once. No single storm buried its towers beneath the sand. No final fire erased its memory in a single night. Instead, Babylon faded gradually beneath the long and patient weight of time itself. Generation after generation, fewer people walked its once crowded streets. The great procession processions no longer filled the ceremonial roads with music and banners. The palace terraces overlooking the river grew quieter, while sections of the enormous walls cracked beneath wind, rain, and neglect. Markets that had once echoed with countless languages slowly emptied beneath the burning Mesopotamian sun. Empires had shifted elsewhere now. Trade routes changed. New capitals rose beyond distant horizons, and Babylon, once the heart of civilization, slowly drifted toward abandonment beside the ancient river. The Hanging Gardens, whether entirely real or partly transformed through legend, disappeared into memory long before anyone could preserve them. Temple roofs weakened beneath years of weather, while carved bricks loosened from aging walls. Sand gathered in forgotten courtyards where musicians had once played beneath lantern light and perfumed evening air. At night, the city became hauntingly still. The Euphrates continued flowing quietly through the darkness just as it always had, indifferent to the fading glory beside its bank. Moonlight touched broken stairways, collapsed archways, and abandoned chambers where kings and priests had once moved through torchlit halls filled with ceremony and ambition. Wild grasses began growing between cracked stones. Birds nested inside silent temples. Wind drifted through empty corridors, carrying dust across floors untouched for generations. Travelers passing near Babylon during these later centuries often described overwhelming feelings of loneliness while standing among the ruins. The scale of the city still inspired awe even in decay. Towering fragments of walls rose unexpectedly from the plains, while shattered foundations hinted at vanished palaces and forgotten gardens beneath the sand. Some visitors struggled to believe that such ruins had once belonged to the greatest city in the world. How could so much beauty disappear? How could voices, music, and human ambition fade so completely into silence? Yet perhaps this is the fate awaiting every civilization eventually. No matter how magnificent the walls, no matter how powerful the king, no matter how brilliant the temples beneath the stars, time moves patiently through all things. And still the desert continued its slow work around Babylon. Warm winds carried sand against weakened stone year after year. Entire sections of the ancient city disappeared beneath drifting earth, while the surrounding plains reclaimed roads once crowded with merchants, soldiers, priests, and travelers from distant kingdoms. The enormous capital slowly became part of the landscape itself, half memory, half ruin beneath endless skies. Yet even in abandonment, Babylon never completely lost its strange power over human imagination. Perhaps it was the silence. Perhaps it was the immense loneliness of the ruins beside the river. Or perhaps people standing among the broken walls could still feel faint echoes of the civilization that once lived there. The music drifting through courtyards, the temple fires beneath the heavens, the voices filling the markets of the ancient world. And so Babylon remained suspended between history and dream long after its empire vanished, resting quietly beneath drifting sand while the Euphrates flowed onward through the sleeping ruins beneath the stars. Long after Babylon's empire faded and its streets fell silent beneath drifting sand, stories about the lost city continued traveling across deserts, mountains, and distant kingdoms. Traders resting beside campfires whispered about ruined walls hidden somewhere along the Euphrates. Pilgrims spoke of shattered towers rising unexpectedly from empty plains beneath the Mesopotamian sun. Ancient maps carried uncertain markings pointing toward a place once called the greatest city on earth. And so, century after century, travelers continued searching for Babylon. Some arrived guided only by legends passed between generations. Others carried old writings describing blue gates, hanging gardens, and temples reaching toward the heavens. Many expected to discover a magnificent city preserved somehow against time itself. Instead, they often found silence. The roads leading toward Babylon grew lonelier with each passing age. Caravans crossed wide stretches of dry land where wind moved endlessly across the plains, carrying dust against weathered stone. Villages surrounding the old capital had long since diminished or disappeared entirely. Palm groves stood isolated beside quiet riverbanks, while broken fragments of ancient walls emerged slowly from the earth like forgotten memories struggling to survive. Travelers approaching the ruins sometimes felt uncertain whether they had truly found Babylon at all. The city described in legends seemed too enormous, too beautiful, too alive to reconcile with the scattered remains resting beneath the desert sky. Massive mounds of earth concealed buried foundations, while collapsed structures blended into the surrounding landscape beneath centuries of erosion and sand. Yet traces remained everywhere for those willing to look closely. Fragments of glazed blue bricks still shimmered faintly beneath sunlight. Broken carvings emerged from cracked stone. Sections of ancient walls stretched across the plains in haunting silence. The Euphrates still flowed nearby exactly as it had during Babylon's golden age, carrying reflections of clouds and moonlight past ruins abandoned long before. Some wandering travelers described overwhelming feelings while standing among the remains. During sunset, the broken city often appeared strangely beautiful beneath warm orange light spreading across the empty plain. Wind whispered through collapsed archways while birds circled silently above shattered temples and forgotten courtyards. At night, the stars returned once again over Babylon just as they had thousands of years earlier when kings, merchants, priests, and musicians filled the city with life. The silence itself became part of the mystery. How could such greatness disappear so completely? Where were the gardens travelers once described with wonder? Where were the towering palaces, the endless markets, the glowing temple fires beneath the heaven? Over time, Babylon transformed into something larger than ordinary history. It became a symbol of lost grandeur, human ambition, and the fragile nature of civilization itself. Some stories exaggerated its beauty until the city seemed almost mythical. Others warned of pride and impermanence hidden beneath its rise and fall. And still, the search continued. Explorers, historians, pilgrims, and dreamers returned again and again to the lonely plains beside the Euphrates, hoping to stand where the ancient city once ruled the world. Perhaps they searched not only for Babylon itself, but for connection to something older and deeper within human memory, the lingering desire to find traces of forgotten civilizations sleeping quietly beneath the sand, while history drifts onward beneath the eternal stars. As centuries passed, the ruins of Babylon sank deeper beneath the earth beside the Euphrates River. Sand drifted across collapsed walls, while broken stones disappeared beneath layers of dust carried slowly through Mesopotamia by endless desert wind. Entire sections of the ancient city vanished from sight until only strange mounds and scattered fragments remained visible beneath the open sky. To distant travelers, the landscape often appeared almost empty, and yet beneath the silent ground, Babylon still slept. Its buried streets, temples, palace foundations, and forgotten chambers rested hidden below the surface, waiting patiently through thousands of years of silence. Clay tablets remained sealed beneath ruined archives. Cracked bricks bearing royal inscriptions lay untouched in darkness, while shattered statues rested where collapsing walls had left them centuries earlier. Eventually, explorers and archaeologists arrived determined to uncover what time and sand had concealed. They crossed the same lonely plains that ancient caravans once traveled, bringing tools, maps, notebooks, and old historical accounts describing the legendary city. Under the fierce Mesopotamian sun, excavations slowly began beside the ancient riverbanks where Babylon had once ruled the world. The work required patience. Workers brushed away layers of dust grain by grain, while archaeologists studied fragments of pottery, foundations, inscriptions, and broken walls emerging carefully from the earth. Day after day, shapes hidden beneath the sand slowly revealed themselves, stairways leading nowhere, enormous defensive walls buried deep underground, and sections of ceremonial roads once crowded with kings, merchants, priests. Perhaps the most emotional discoveries came through ordinary objects, not the grand monuments alone, but the quiet traces of everyday human life preserved beneath the ruin. Clay tablets marked with careful writing, cooking vessels left behind inside abandoned homes, jewelry worn by forgotten citizens thousands of years earlier, children's toys buried beneath collapsed rooms. These discoveries reminded the modern world that Babylon had not simply been an empire or a legend. It had been a living city filled with ordinary people whose lives unfolded beside the Euphrates beneath the same stars visible today. At times, archaeologists uncovered fragments of the Ishtar Gate itself. Brilliant blue glazed bricks still held traces of their ancient color despite centuries buried beneath dust and darkness. Lion figures, decorative carvings, and royal inscriptions emerged slowly into sunlight once again after sleeping underground for generations beyond counting. The atmosphere surrounding the excavations often felt strangely quiet and reflective. Warm winds crossed the ruins while distant birds circled overhead against pale skies. Workers moved carefully among broken foundations where palace walls once stood. At sunset, long shadows stretched across the uncovered stones while the desert itself seemed to glow softly around the remains of the ancient city. And beneath every layer of sand waited another question. How much of Babylon still remained hidden? Where exactly had the Hanging Gardens stood, if they truly existed at all? What forgotten stories still rested inside buried chambers untouched by human hands for thousands of years? Even as archaeologists uncovered remarkable discoveries, the city preserved much of its mystery. Perhaps that mystery is part of why Babylon continues fascinating the human imagination. The ruins revealed enough to prove the city's extraordinary greatness, yet left enough hidden beneath the earth for wonder to survive beside history. And so the ancient capital remained suspended between knowledge and legend, half uncovered beneath the desert sun, half still dreaming quietly beneath the sand beside the slow, eternal river. Among all the wonders connected to ancient Babylon, none has inspired more fascination than the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon. For centuries, travelers, historians, poets, and dreamers imagined terraces overflowing with green life rising above the dry plains of Mesopotamia, trees swaying high above the city walls while cool water flowed endlessly through shaded gardens beside the Euphrates River. And yet, despite all the stories, no one can say with complete certainty whether the gardens truly existed. This mystery has followed Babylon through history like moonlight across ruin. Ancient writers described extraordinary terraces built layer upon layer above the earth itself. Some accounts spoke of exotic plants gathered from distant mountains and forests across the empire. Others described fountains, shaded walkways, flowering vines, and cool streams carried upward through hidden engineering systems that seemed almost impossible for the ancient world. To later generations, the gardens sounded less like architecture and more like a dream, a paradise suspended above the desert, a mountain of green rising beside temple towers and palace walls, a place where beauty overcame the harshness of the surrounding world. Many stories connected the gardens to Nebuchadnezzar II and a queen who longed for the forested landscapes of her homeland far from Mesopotamia's endless plain. According to legend, the king ordered the construction of the gardens so she would no longer feel homesick within Babylon's dry and sunburned horizon. Whether true or not, the story survived because it carried emotional power. It transformed imperial architecture into something deeply human, an act of love, memory, and longing beneath the ancient stars. Yet when archaeologists searched the ruins of Babylon centuries later, clear evidence remained strangely difficult to find. Fragments of massive structures emerged beneath the sand. Ancient foundations hinted at complex buildings once standing beside the river, but no discovery fully confirmed the gardens exactly as the old stories described them. Some historians began wondering whether the Hanging Gardens had existed somewhere else entirely. Others believed the gardens were exaggerated over generations until history and imagination became impossible to separate. Ancient travelers often described distant cities through awe and rumor rather than careful accuracy. Stories grew larger each time they were retold beside campfires, royal courts, and crowded marketplaces across the ancient world. And still, the image survived, perhaps because the Hanging Gardens represent something larger than historical certainty alone. Human beings have always carried a strange need to imagine paradise. In harsh landscapes, we dream of flowing water. In times of uncertainty, we imagine hidden beauty. And in civilizations shaped by war, heat, and survival, people often create stories about peaceful places overflowing with life. The gardens embodied that dream perfectly. Even today, standing among Babylon's ruins beneath the Mesopotamian sky, it is easy to imagine them still existing somewhere beyond sight. One can almost hear water moving softly through elevated terraces while warm evening winds stir leaves above the palace walls. Moonlight touches hidden stairways while distant music drifts upward from lanternlit courtyards below. Perhaps the gardens were real. Perhaps they became larger through centuries of memory and storytelling. Or perhaps the truth exists somewhere between history and imagination where the most enduring legends often live. Because some places survive not through stone alone, but through the emotional landscapes they create within the human mind. And so the Hanging Gardens continue blooming gently across memory itself, suspended forever between myth and reality beside the eternal river flowing through ancient Babylon beneath the stars. Long after Babylon's walls crumbled beneath drifting sand, the city continued living within human imagination. Its empire vanished. Its kings disappeared into history. Its palaces fell silent beside the Euphrates River, and yet Babylon refused to fade completely from memory. Instead, it transformed into something larger than a ruined city. It became a symbol. Across centuries, civilizations far removed from Mesopotamia continued speaking the name Babylon with fascination, fear, wonder, and mystery. Ancient religious texts described it as a place of immense power and dangerous pride. Poets imagined it as the ultimate city of human ambition rising boldly beneath the heaven. Travelers carried stories about its hanging gardens, blue gates, and towering temples into lands whose people would never see the Euphrates with their own eyes. The real Babylon slowly dissolved into myth, and perhaps that transformation was inevitable. Cities built from stone eventually weaken beneath time. But cities carried through stories can survive forever. In religious traditions, Babylon often represented both greatness and fragility, a reminder that even the most powerful civilizations remain temporary beneath the vastness of history and the heavens above. Its fall became symbolic of the rise and collapse waiting quietly within all human empires, no matter how magnificent they appear during their golden years. Yet Babylon was never remembered only with fear or warning. Many people also imagined it with longing. The city represented beauty, mystery, learning, architecture, astronomy, and dreams larger than ordinary life. The image of torchlit processional roads, rivers flowing beneath moonlit walls, and gardens rising above the desert continued capturing human imagination across generations. Even those who knew Babylon only through legends felt emotionally drawn toward it. Perhaps because Babylon reflected something deeply human. Human beings have always built cities not only for survival, but for meaning. We gather stone, shape walls, raise temples, create music, study the stars, and tell stories because we hope something of ourselves might endure beyond our own brief lives. Babylon became one of history's clearest symbols of that longing, and so the city survived in memory long after it disappeared physically from the world. Writers described it, artists painted it, religious thinkers reflected upon it, dreamers imagined wandering through its glowing streets beneath ancient constellations. Even today, the word Babylon still carries emotional weight, unlike the names of many forgotten empires buried beside history's rivers. At night, standing among the ruins where the city once flourished, one can almost understand why the legend endured so powerfully. The Euphrates still moves quietly through the darkness. Warm winds still cross the plains of Mesopotamia beneath endless stars. Silence rests where markets, temples, and palaces once overflowed with life. And within that silence remains the faint echo of humanity itself, ambitious, creative, fragile, and forever searching for permanence against the endless passage of time. Babylon may have vanished as an empire, but as a symbol woven into memory and myth, it never truly disappeared beneath the ancient sky. The Euphrates River still flows through the lands where Babylon once ruled the ancient world. Long after the empire vanished, long after the temples collapsed and the palace walls surrendered to dust and silence, the river continued its endless journey beneath the Mesopotamian sky. Seasons changed, kingdoms rose and disappeared. Generations passed like drifting sand carried through the desert wind. Yet the water moved onward exactly as it had during Babylon's first beginnings beside the fertile plains thousands of years earlier. Perhaps that is why the memory of Babylon feels strangely eternal, not because its walls survived untouched, not because its kings conquered forever, but because the city became woven into the deeper rhythm of human history itself. Even now, when people imagine the ancient world, Babylon often appears glowing beside the river beneath torchlight and stars. The Ishtar Gate rises once more in the imagination with its deep blue bricks shining beneath the sun. Temple fires flicker against the darkness while priests study the heavens from high terraces above sleeping streets. Somewhere hidden among palace walls, gardens bloom softly beside flowing water suspended above the earth like a dream. The city lives on because memory preserved what stone could not. History remembers many empires only as name, but Babylon became atmosphere. It became feeling. A vision of humanity reaching toward greatness beneath the endless heavens, and perhaps there is something comforting about that survival. Civilizations may disappear physically, yet the emotions they create can outlast centuries. The beauty people build, the stories they tell, the music floating through their courtyards, the questions they ask beneath the stars, these things echo quietly forward long after walls crumble into dust. At night, the ruins of Babylon still rest beneath enormous skies filled with constellations ancient priests once studied with careful wonder. Warm winds cross the broken stones while moonlight touches the silent earth where markets, temples, and homes once overflowed with life. The city feels distant, yet somehow close at the same time, as though history itself never fully left the riverbanks. Perhaps travelers standing there today can still sense faint traces of the old world lingering beneath the silence, the footsteps of merchants arriving through the gates, the voices of children running beside crowded streets, the distant sound of music drifting through lanternlit courtyards, the quiet scratching of scribes preserving memory upon clay, and above all, the endless flow of the Euphrates carrying reflections of stars through the darkness beside the sleeping ruin. Babylon teaches something gentle about human existence. Greatness fades, power changes hands, empires rise and disappear beneath time, Yet beauty, imagination, and memory possess their own quiet form of permanence. As long as people continue telling stories about Babylon, the city never fully vanishes. It remains alive within dreams, books, ruins, and the soft curiosity carried through generations searching the ancient world for meaning beneath the stars. And somewhere beside the eternal river flowing patiently through Mesopotamia, the spirit of Babylon still lingers peacefully between history and legend, while night settles softly across the silent plains of the ancient world. Night settles differently over abandoned places. In living cities, darkness carries movement, footsteps through narrow streets, distant voices drifting from open windows, the glow of lanterns swaying beside crowded roads. But in ruins, night feels deeper, slower, almost suspended outside ordinary time. The world grows still in a way that invites memory itself to awaken beneath the stars. And so it is with Babylon. Long after the empire disappeared, long after its kings vanished into dust and legend, the ancient city remained resting beside the Euphrates beneath enormous skies filled with silence. Broken walls stretched across the plains where processions once passed beneath banners and torchlight. Cracked foundations lay buried beneath drifting sand, while moonlight touched stones worn smooth by generations already forgotten. The air itself seemed quieter there. Warm desert winds moved softly through empty spaces where markets once overflowed with life. The river continued flowing calmly through darkness beside ruins abandoned long ago, carrying silver reflections of stars across water that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations beyond counting. Perhaps this is why ancient ruins affect the human heart so deeply. They remind us that countless lives existed before our own. Inside Babylon's silent remains once lived children laughing through crowded alleyways, merchants bargaining beneath woven shades, priests climbing temple stairways beneath the moon, musicians playing softly inside lanternlit courtyards while families gathered together beside flowing water. Entire worlds of thought, love, ambition, fear, beauty, and ordinary daily existence unfolded here beneath the same heavens we still see today. Now only silence remains, yet even silence carries memory. On certain nights, one can almost imagine the city breathing again beneath the stars. Wind passing through broken archways begins sounding like distant voices echoing softly across forgotten streets. Moonlight touches ruined walls where palace fires once glowed warmly against the darkness. The emptiness itself feels filled with traces of human presence lingering gently beneath time. Travelers who stood among Babylon's ruins often described unusual emotions difficult to fully explain. Not fear, not sorrow alone, but something quieter. A feeling of standing between worlds, between past and present, between memory and disappearance, between the fragile human desire for permanence and the endless movement of history itself. The ruins invite reflection because they reveal how temporary even greatness can become. Babylon once believed itself eternal. Its walls towered beside the Euphrates, its armies crossed distant kingdoms, its scholars studied the heavens with remarkable wisdom. Its gardens were spoken of as wonders beyond imagination. And yet centuries passed and silence slowly reclaimed everything. The same truth waits patiently for every civilization. For every city glowing brightly beneath the night sky, for every empire certain of its own permanence. Time moves gently through all human things. Still, there is comfort hidden within these ruins as well. Because although Babylon vanished physically, it never completely disappeared from human consciousness. The city survived through stories, dreams, memory, and imagination carried carefully across generations. Even now, thousands of years later, people still speak its name with wonder. Perhaps this means something important. Perhaps civilizations do not survive only through stone walls and monuments. Perhaps they survive through the emotions they awaken inside those who remember them. Babylon continues living because humanity still feels drawn toward its mystery, toward the image of moonlit temples beside the river, hanging gardens suspended above the earth, torchlit gates glowing blue beneath ancient stars. At night, the silence surrounding the ruins becomes almost peaceful. The world feels slower there, more patient. The endless urgency of ordinary life fades beneath the enormous sky stretching over Mesopotamia. Wind brushes softly across broken stone while constellations move gradually through darkness exactly as they did when Babylon stood at the height of its glory. And somewhere within that stillness emerges a strange understanding. Human beings have always searched for ways to leave something behind against the passing of time. We build cities, we create art, we write stories, we study the heavens. We love places so deeply that even after they vanish, memory continues carrying them forward. Babylon became one of those places, not merely an empire, not merely ruin, but a reflection of humanity itself, ambitious, beautiful, fragile, and endlessly reaching toward permanence beneath the stars. Tonight, beside the silent Euphrates, the ancient city rests peacefully beneath moonlight and drifting wind. The temple fires have long since faded. The markets have fallen quiet. The palace walls stand broken against the sky. Yet somewhere within memory, Babylon still glows softly through the darkness while the river flows onward beside the sleeping ruins of the ancient world. History moves like a river through the centuries. Civilizations rise beside fertile waters, beneath mountain skies, along coastlines touched by trade winds and sunlight. At first they begin quietly, a few homes gathered together against uncertainty, small communities learning how to survive through cooperation, memory, and hope. Then slowly, over generations, those settlements grow into cities filled with voices, markets, temples, music, and ambition. And for a time, each civilization believes its greatness might endure forever. Babylon believed this once. So did Egypt beside the Nile. So did the empires rising across Greece, Persia, Rome, and countless kingdoms now half forgotten beneath history's drifting sands. Every civilization imagines itself standing at the center of the world while its towers still rise proudly beneath the stars. Perhaps this is one of the most human patterns of all. We build because we long for permanence. We raise walls against chaos. We carve stories into stone. We study the heavens, searching for order beyond ourselves. And deep within every empire lives the quiet hope that something beautiful might survive after individual lives fade into silence. Babylon understood this longing deeply. Its kings built monuments meant to outlast centuries. Priests recorded celestial movements upon clay tablets with extraordinary patience. Merchants crossed dangerous deserts carrying goods between civilizations, while musicians filled evening courtyards with melodies drifting softly through lantern light. Ordinary people raised families, shared meals, laughed together, and dreamed beside the Euphrates exactly as people everywhere always have. For a while, the city flourished beyond imagination. Then slowly, almost invisibly at first, change arrived. Empires rarely recognize the moment their decline truly begins. The transformation often unfolds gently through years of exhaustion, shifting power, internal uncertainty, and the endless movement of history beyond their borders. One generation remembers greatness clearly. The next inherits only fragments of that confidence. Eventually, even magnificent capitals grow quiet beneath the passing centuries, and yet humanity continues building. This may be the most remarkable truth of all. Despite knowing how fragile civilizations become, people still create new cities, new art, new stories, and new dreams beneath every age of history. Again and again, humanity chooses creation over despair. We continue reaching toward beauty even while understanding how temporary beauty can be, perhaps because impermanence itself gives meaning to what we build. The Hanging Gardens, whether entirely real or partly transformed through legend, still move the imagination because they symbolized human beings refusing to surrender completely to harshness and emptiness. In the middle of dry plains and uncertain empires, someone imagined flowing water, shade, flowers, and green life rising toward the heaven. There is something deeply comforting in that vision. At night, the ruins of Babylon remind us not only of collapse, but also of extraordinary human effort. Every broken wall once required hands to build it. Every temple began as imagination before becoming stone. Every civilization, no matter how powerful, was created by ordinary people waking each morning beneath the same sky we still see today. Moonlight now rests upon the silent remains of Babylon, where kings once walked through palace halls and children once chased one another beside crowded markets. Wind crosses shattered foundations while the Euphrates continues flowing calmly through darkness nearby. And still the stars remain overhead. The same constellations watched Babylon rise, the same heavens watched it fade. The universe itself moves patiently beyond human ambition, yet humanity continues searching for meaning within that vastness generation after generation. Perhaps this is why ancient ruins feel strangely peaceful at night. They remind us that nothing lasts forever, yet also reveal how deeply human beings have always desired to leave beauty behind for those who come later. Civilizations vanish, but traces remain, stories, music, knowledge, art, memory, and emotional echoes carried quietly across time. Even failure becomes part of the greater human story. Babylon did not survive as an empire, yet thousands of years later, people still whisper its name beneath the stars. The city continues living through imagination itself, and maybe that is enough. Perhaps permanence was never truly found in walls, armies, or monuments alone. Perhaps it survives instead through memory, through the gentle continuation of stories carried forward by people who still pause to wonder about ancient cities beside forgotten rivers. Tonight, the plains of Mesopotamia rest quietly beneath moonlight while warm warm desert winds move softly across buried stones hidden beneath the earth. Somewhere beneath the silence sleeps the memory of Babylon, fragile, beautiful, and eternally human beneath the endless sky. And now, at the end of the long journey beside the Euphrates, Babylon rests once more beneath the stars. The city no longer shines with blue gates and torchlit processions. Its palace halls have fallen silent. The music that once drifted through hidden courtyards faded centuries ago into the warm desert wind. The merchants, priests, astronomers, kings, scribes, and children who filled its streets have all passed gently into history like footprints disappearing across soft sand. Yet somehow, Babylon never truly vanished. Even now, in quiet moments beneath the night sky, the ancient city still lives within human imagination. Perhaps it appears first as moonlight touching the surface of slow-moving water, or the distant image of gardens rising above stone terraces filled with flowing fountains and cool shadows beneath the desert stars. Perhaps it lives inside the sound of temple bells imagined faintly across forgotten streets, or within the soft glow of lanterns reflected along the Euphrates after sunset. Memory preserved what time could not. Long after the empire dissolved, people continued dreaming about Babylon. Travelers crossed empty plains searching for traces of its greatness. Historians studied broken tablets beneath dim lamps trying to reconstruct vanished lives from fragments of clay and stone. Artists painted towering gates and impossible gardens. Writers filled pages with stories about the golden city beside the river where human ambition once reached toward eternity itself. And somewhere within all those dreams, Babylon remained alive. Perhaps that is the final mystery of the city, not whether the hanging gardens truly existed, not how large the walls once stood, not even how the empire finally faded beneath the weight of history, but why, after thousands of years, the thought of Babylon still touches something quiet and emotional within the human heart. Maybe it is because the city reflects our oldest longing. The desire to create beauty against impermanence, to build something lasting beside the endless flow of time, to leave behind music, stories, gardens, knowledge, and memory, even while knowing the world itself constantly changes beneath the stars. Babylon became more than ruins because it carried those human dreams so vividly. Tonight, the ancient plains of Mesopotamia rest peacefully beneath moonlight. Warm winds drift across the silent earth where walls, temples, and markets once stood glowing with life. The Euphrates still moves slowly through darkness exactly as it did when the first settlers arrived beside the rivers thousands of years ago. The stars remain above everything. The same constellations watched Babylon rise from mud-brick villages beside the water. The same stars watched kings build monuments and gardens meant to challenge time itself. The same heavens watched empires weaken, walls crumble, and silence return to the riverbanks once more. And now those stars shine quietly over the sleeping ruins while history settles softly into memory. Perhaps somewhere beneath the drifting sand, fragments of Babylon still rest untouched, hidden chambers, forgotten tablets, traces of footsteps preserved beneath the earth. Yet even if every stone eventually disappears, the city itself has already survived in another way. It survives whenever someone imagines torchlight glowing against blue walls beneath the ancient sky, whenever people wonder whether gardens once bloomed above the desert, whenever someone stands beneath the stars and reflects upon how fragile, beautiful, and temporary civilizations can be. Babylon continues living there, inside imagination, inside memory, inside the timeless human habit of looking backward through history searching for meaning among lost worlds. And perhaps that is why the city still feels strangely peaceful at night. The urgency of empire has faded away. The battles have ended. The kings no longer command armies from palace terraces. What remains now is softer. Only the river, only the stars. Only the quiet beauty of memory surviving beyond ruin. Far away, the wind moves gently across the plains while moonlight settles over broken stones hidden beneath the earth. Somewhere within the darkness, the dream of Babylon still lingers beside the Euphrates, calm, distant, and eternal in the imagination of humanity. And as the ancient river flows onward beneath the silent heavens, the gardens of Babylon continue blooming softly where they always belonged most of all, inside the dreaming mind.